Okay, go ahead.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call this Board of Education meeting to order dated August 11th, 2025. Do we have any written statements for public speaking? Okay, moving on to the approval of minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the Operations Work Group meeting dated June 9th, 2025. Board Member Lee, your advisory vote?
Second, Maya.
Oh, sorry.
Aye.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on, we have quite the agenda tonight, kind of packed, and so we will dive right in with our healthcare discussion for 26-27.
Thank you, Chair Castro, members of the board. Welcome to the first Operations Work Group meeting of the 5-26 school year. Tonight, we do have a number of items to get through. First is an update on health insurance. Senior Executive Director of Human Resources, Jennifer. Get us going. Take you to tonight's presentation. Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. Gothard. Thank you, Chair Castro. Tonight I have with me Benefits Manager Rachel Carabell and three Headland brands from N3 who are our N3 is the our broker agent for healthcare. So we have just a few updates on going to the RFP, a timeline, the risks and the advantages. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Rachel now.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer. If we can, yep, right, thank you. I'll just quickly give a few highlights, walk through the slide. Bree may add some color commentary as well. Feel free to ask us any questions. As you may remember, at the November board meeting, this board voted to require the district to go to an RFP for health insurance for 26-27 school year. M3 is our broker. They will facilitate the process for that RFP. And we've identified on this slide some of the potential bidders that M3 identified. Possibly, again, our current vendors, Ports and Dean Health Plan, BHC South Central, which the district was with up until or through 2003. Anthem is a national carrier. They're the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, if you're familiar with them. And also the Wisconsin Counties Association, their group health trust. They are a self-insured plan and they use United Healthcare as their administrator. They are also a potential bidder. Next slide. So this is a reminder of what we are expecting to pay this year for health insurance. The district will pay about $84.4 million. Now that's contingent on enrollment and whatnot. But that is what we're expecting the district to pay. The employee share of those premiums are expected to be about $5.5 million. And then $3.2 million we expect to pay our retirees to pay for the group insurance. So that $3.2 million for retirees, that does not include those that are on Medicare because they have individual policies that they pay for. So those are just retirees with an escrow account with the district. Next slide, please. Here's a little history, and this goes backwards in time, if you will, of what we looked at for the last few years. Last year, with no plan changes, the courts renewal was a 15.9% increase. The renewal was a 13.9% increase. Year prior, courts had the same increase, but deemed higher at 19.9%. Again, no plan changes. And then, as you'll recall, 23-24, that was the year we switched from PhD to courts. And so you can see with court, the 13.1% increase compared to the rate. Couple of things were driving those rates. Some of it was our claims relative to the premiums that the plans were collecting. They were trying to get to a certain loss ratio, but it was also medical trend. Medical trend, I'll describe that in a moment, is basically the inflationary cost of the plan. So we can go to the next slide, please. So these are the factors that insurers generally put when they're, or they consider when they're putting together their renewal rates. Again, there's that medical cost trend. It's really that inflationary number plus any utilization change, but does not include plan changes. Okay. The other thing is that loss ratio. That's what premiums are relative to claims. And so the insurers have a target rate of what claims should be enough to cover not only or what premiums should be to cover claim costs plus their admin costs. So that's another factor when they set their rates. Market factors are also a huge part of that. So how are they doing in the market? How are they doing relative to the competitors? Are there regulatory changes? Are there new competitors entering the market? A big part of it is the provider pressure. So when the medical providers, the hospital, doctors are under pressure, they put pressure on the insurers for better reimbursement rates. That can be a huge factor. And then of course, business decisions. So these are the decisions carriers make to provide a discount based on a variety, their ability to do that and also how valuable we are. Usually a business decision to accept less than their targeted rate is going to be acceptable for only a limited amount of time. We don't know what that limited amount might be. So the outlook for next year's renewals, without an RFP, it could be another tough year. Right now, all of the projections are that the medical trend, that cost factor, is looking to be about the same as it's been the last couple of years, about 8.5% for both 2025 and so that's if we do nothing. That's what inflation for medical costs is looking. Our claims, based on the most recent data we have, suggest that our claims are continuing with the premium that the plans are there. Now, that does not reflect the premium increase we saw last year, so maybe things will continue to improve by the time we get numbered, but at this point, it's still not looking good. The other big change that is happening is there is expected to be significant financial stress in the healthcare sector. Providers and insurers are expected to take a big hit from that federal legislation that you've all heard about. Medicare payment cuts are happening. That's going to put stress on providers. Medicaid enrollment is expected to decrease significantly, which is going to likely increase the number of uninsured across the country. The marketplaces exchanges, the ACA, healthcare.gov, if you've heard of that, the individual market, they're expected to be dramatic decreases there because the tax credits are not expected to be renewed. So there are going to be significant pressures on insurers and on providers because of that federal legislation. And it's creating an awful lot of uncertainty. When there's uncertainty, insurers get conservative. So it's for all of those reasons, we're expecting a bad renewal next year. Next one. So in the Dane County market, it's really dominated by Dean, Quartz, and GHC. Those really are the dominant players. There are some other players, Anthem I mentioned, they're in the individual market. I don't know if you're aware of.
They do. I mean, Anthem's trying to break into Dane County a little bit more. Typically, the national carriers historically have not been able to play here because our HMOs are so strong. Well, the HMO bubble has been popping, unfortunately, and we felt it. We've all kind of been feeling that, all of our Dane County schools, and therefore Anthem has had kind of a way in a bit. So really excited to see if they will be a true player and can be competitive.
And then the other insurer there is WPS. They don't really have much of a group presence at all anymore, except for perhaps in the health insurance space. One of the things that is also unique about Dane County, because of the dominance of those HMOs, they prefer the fully insured model. In a lot of other areas of the state, when you're as big as we are, a lot of those employers, whether it's a school district, private employer, they're going to go self-funded. So there's risk with that. There's a lot of upfront costs, but in the Dane County market, because the provider owners and those insurers prefer the fully insured market, that seems to be the dominant approach.
Chair, am I allowed to ask questions now, or would you like to? Yeah,
Could we please wait till the end?
certainly.
So this is a timeline that M3 put together for us for the RFP. It's really gonna start this fall and it'll start in October. We will provide a census to them, meaning our enrollment. And that will be shared with the carriers and M3 will start talking with folks in the falls. I know this is kind of small, but that's the timeline that we're looking at right now.
Oh, I don't think so. We just wanted to lay it out for everybody to understand what the next steps are. And just, kind of what our process looks like. Of course, make adjustments if we need to do that. If there needs to be some more communication to the board. We can move things around, but this is a typical timeline we would use because we can only ask for the proposal so early because we are a 7/1 renewal. So we're already, we're pushing it for them, which I know they'll respond because we're a large group, but this kind of gives you an idea of what it will look like.
And then here are some things to think about as we are going through this RFP process. We really required choice when it comes to having a carrier. And the reason for that is we are so large, and there is already an access problem in Dane County, meaning it is hard to get a new appointment with a provider at this point. And that's with our current network, which pretty much has everybody in Dane County. And I forgot to mention, in addition to UW Health and SSM provider, we also need the Meritor and Unity Point providers as well to really meet our employees' needs to get in for care. So if we don't have insurers that offer all of those providers, we definitely need at least 2 different options for people to choose. Quartz has already acknowledged that they on their own are not big enough to meet our needs. They just don't have a large enough provider network. We did ask them about doing a dual choice arrangement some time ago with GHC and they said they won't do it. And the reason for that is they compete, they have the same specialty network. And so that means if for UW Health in particular, the people that don't expect to need specialty care may be more likely to sign up for a GHC plan. But if they want quick and easy access to a UW provider, meaning they need specialty care and more likely to have expensive conditions, they're much more likely to choose Quartz. So Quartz will be at a significant disadvantage in terms of employee choice if they do a dual choice with you.
I'll just add that's what happened to us and why we made the decision to leave our 3 carrier model. If we remember that, I know. Yep, many of you were wrong for it. Was that just you, Nikki? Okay, well then you remember. So that's what was happening. We had, most of our high cost claimants were all going to Quartz. And so those rates were going up, substantially. And we had a smaller population with Quartz. And at that point in time, that's when the decision was made to eliminate Quartz. It was Unity at the time and just go with GHC and Dean.
The last piece down there is important to keep in mind. If as a result of the RFP, we decide to leave Quartz, their offer since they took over in 2023 was contingent on us staying with them until at least July 1, 2027. If we are to leave prior to July 1, 2027, we will incur a 4-month penalty. We're estimating based on current premiums, that's about $24 million. It's a big dollar amount. Whether they would be willing to negotiate on that, or we could use that somehow in the RFP process, that's to be determined. But that is a risk if, as a result of the RFP, we look at leaving Quartz. So we wanted to make sure you were all aware of. You have, I think that's our last slide. Do you have anything else?
No, we'll see what the.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermill and then Board Member Muldrow.
Yes, I appreciate the presentation. However, I am disappointed about the profits of the insurance companies, not you guys, the profits of the insurance companies referred to as their medical inflation. It's record profit, that's what it is. I'm sorry, that's just amazing. But what I'm concerned about is this. You guys do a great job, but we keep saying they won't allow, and we can't, or we asked and they won't. My question is, with as large as we are, what kind of pressure can we put on them? And I'm not interested in plan design. I understand Medicare makes it difficult. I know, I've been on it my entire life. I tend to understand that every day. So I'm just curious how we can better help you to provide leverage to that.
I would be.
Well, and that's why we're doing the RFP process. So even though we all just saw the language from courts and
Yes.
that penalty was established when we had to make that jump, from GHC to courts, we didn't have a lot of leverage at that point. But now I feel like, we'll be getting some back. We will do that RFP and hopefully we will get some good responses and we can put some pressure on courts. We will talk with courts, negotiate like we always do, see if they will be more open to adjusting that language, but very interested to see what our response will be from the market. If we can get some help, like I said, from an Anthem or from the other voting carriers, that does give us some leverage, with Andy for that matter.
One more question.
Yep.
Chair. Actually, it's more of a comment. My question is, when you talk to the other ones, can we get a quote without plan design, for
Yep.
example?
So they will match what our program is
Yes,
to.
I didn't
Yep.
understand if it was or if it wasn't.
Yep.
And that's all I,
Yeah, we get to decide whatever we want to put in that RFP.
okay,
So
wanted to make sure, I thought so,
Mhm.
but as I said, RFPs are still, I may be around them a lot, that doesn't mean I understand all of them, so
Great question.
I appreciate that. That's all I have, Chair.
Board Member Mulgrew.
Thank you so much, Chair Castro. So my first question is, when we moved away from having beat providers, my understanding of that was in part, that was a cost saving strategy, that we were spending more to have 3 than we would be spending to have 2. What you just said was something different, which is that we had 2 that were leveraging the same network, and it was putting a certain level of strain on those providers. Obviously, it can be both, but I want to get into the nuts and bolts of the cost savings in comparison to the strain on providers.
I'll let you start. I'll add anything I think.
No, that's fine. So great question. So it was, I was piggybacking on kind of what Rachel was saying, because I feel like, I wanted to, not everyone was here, right? I thought more people were here. I mixed up my dates. I feel like, I don't even know what.
We were all around in some capacity or.
I thought you kind of were. So I mean, really, it was twofold. We were looking at cost, we're always looking at cost, right? And so Unity at the time was our highest cost provider. So what we evaluated, we had to make sure that our membership would still have access, right? And a big piece was the access to UW. They would still have that through GHC. GHC was the lowest cost program at the time, right? So, and then we needed to still have the access with Dean. We looked at all the different ways. It was looking at one provider, it was looking at two provider model, and then do we still keep the third? And after doing the evaluation, it was cost saving to the district. It was cost saving to some staff members, especially with the high cost premium from the Unity plan. And then still access to UW, those UW specialists, that was the key. So that's, I think, kind of what we were talking about, with, I don't want to say double access, but people had direct access to UW when they were with Unity. And the people that had our highest cost claimants were all kind of flocking to that Unity plan because it's easier to get right to those UW specialists if you have Unity as your health insurance card versus GHC, where GHC is really that primary care model. They would try to do as many things as they could with their own care, with their own providers before they would send to UW. And we had a number of, enough of our staff members that were like, I want that direct shot to UW.
Yeah, so my other understanding is, and I appreciate you kind of honing in what folks needed from the different plans and what makes one plan appealing. My understanding is that at that time, Unity was our most popular plan.
It didn't have the most membership. We still had GHC was still the bulk of our membership. And then it was kind of a split between Dean and Unity, but Unity was ticking up.
Okay.
So that's why it really came down to that evaluation at that time. And it was a tipping point to determine, you know, we see that more people were going to most likely join. And that was kind of the cost that was skyrocketing. And GHC at the time said, we can manage this better for you.
Okay. So Quartz is now saying, we have worked with you all for a few years. We've worked with you all while leveraging GHC's provider. So it seems like initially when we entered this deal, they had to work with GHC. And now we're into about the middle of the deal, and they're saying, absolutely, we cannot work with GHC. That seems like a real shift.
Yeah,
So-
I'm
Well,
sorry.
one thing I
There's
want
a
to add is they do work with GHC still. As a matter of fact, that is one thing about this arrangement that we were able to negotiate is, and it's very unique to MMSD, is that Quartz does have GHC providers still in network. So that is still very important to make sure that we have those providers and people were able to maintain.
That's supposed to end, is my understanding. That's supposed to
It's-
set this year.
It's not guaranteed to renew, but they have, my understanding, they have no plans to change it.
They don't, they need, so this is where it gets so confusing. There's GHC, the health insurance arm, and there's GHC, the provider system.
Yeah.
Quartz needs GHC, the provider system, because of the access issues. And there's no one has said they're going to change anything. They have to give us, MMSD, a year's notice if they are going to no longer be able to have GHC's providers in the Quartz network. So they don't, neither one of them they're not looking to change that because Quartz needs the GHC providers. Quartz doesn't want to have GHC be another health insurance carrier.
Mhm.
That's where this just gets so tricky because they're both a health insurance and they're a provider system, GHC. So that, hopefully that clears it up a little
No,
bit.
it's like the relationships are intertwined in
Yes.
very specific ways. And I think it's important that we have a thorough understanding of that when we're talking about getting competitive bids, because this is beyond kind of the dollars and cents, and it really does impact the quality of care that our employees have access to. And so I appreciate the nuance of the conversation. My last question about this is, if we get a more competitive bid from GHC, or we get a more competitive bid from Aetna or a national outfit, it seems counterintuitive to me that the district would be in the position of saying, we can only take this more competitive bid that meets the needs of the folks that work for us if it's okay with Quartz. So I guess I'm curious about what we put into our contract that says Quartz gets to decide who else we can work with.
It is part of the renewal that we signed.
Mhm.
It was one of the contingencies of their offer and we signed it and agreed to it. As Bree suggested, if we have a better offer and decide to leave, of course, M3 will negotiate on our behalf to try and avoid.
I'm not talking about leaving Quartz. I'm talking about saying, we're gonna keep Quartz, we're gonna continue to pay Quartz.
Mhm.
And we're also gonna move away from Dean because we have a more competitive offer that makes more sense. And so you're saying if that more competitive offer that would move us away from Dean's, but have us maintain the relationship with Quartz comes from GHC, that Quartz would require us to terminate our contract with them.
I believe the way they would do it, they would withdraw their bid if it was GHC based on what they've shared with us. Is that yours? I'm sorry, I'm not talking.
Wait. I just want to make sure I understand your question. That's
The courts.
That courts would
refuses
say-
to go into full choice. GHC. That's how I understand.
Right, so they're saying, we won't go into dual choice with GHC, we will go into dual choice with Dean. We can't, they're saying we cannot provide for all of your people, so you have to have two options, but this one option. We will not work with you if you have that option. It just happens to be, one of the largest providers in the community that we've worked with, and they leverage the providers of. It feels a little complicated in that way. The other thing that feels a little strange to me is that doesn't seem like a consistent standard across government bodies, right? So I don't think that that dynamic is pronounced in the same way for, let's say, state employees working at Mendota Mental Health who have the option of GHC or courts. Talk to me a little bit about why that can work for the state, which, you know, they have a few more employees than us.
One of the key differences there for the state is the employees pay the same regardless of which plan they choose.
Okay.
Here, people pay based on the percentage of premium. So if you go to GHC, your 6% might be different for that carrier versus court. So that is a significant difference that affects which provider people choose.
Okay, and to get really into the nuts and bolts of this, what I very much want to understand is, I hear what you're saying in relationship to GHC, and obviously the explanation does make sense to me. Doesn't give us the greatest amount of like leverage in this conversation, but I understand court's intentionality in terms of how they position themselves for success and ability to serve folks, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of that. But the other question then becomes, were we to move away from Dean and choose a different Edna, or I'm sorry, you highlighted somebody that was up there.
Anthem?
Would we then have to go back to courts and say, hey, before we move away from Dean, we need to make sure that you all can be a dual provider with Anthem or Edna or something that isn't GHC?
Because Anthem is a national network, they have everybody in, right? So it would include all of the providers, the SSMs, the UWs, the health systems. That the difference with our HMOs is that courts is owned by UW Health, right?
Mhm.
And then Dean is partially owned by SSM. So because those are healthcare system owned insurance arms, Anthem isn't. They're national. They rent all of the providers around town. So we would just be with Anthem, period. Courts gone, Dean gone. One carrier, one national carrier. And another example, you know, if somebody else would, you know, I would say what's challenging with Dean is Dean, right? And is connected with SSM. Courts and GHC are unique because GHC used to have some connections with SSM. All of those are gone now, and everything, all the specialty care, everything goes to UW. So that's what makes courts and GHC a little bit, right? You know, kind of. Yeah.
I think everything going to UW is something I want to parse apart, because there is an entire work that ends up at Meriter in relationship to a plan facilitated through GHC. I don't think we need to get into the nuts and bolts of that this evening, but I do think what I want to understand moving forward is what like is the most competitive bid, and then what are the options that bid makes available to folks. And so when I think about like kind of the quality of care folks are going to be able to receive, I think that needs to be kind of a pronounced part of this conversation. That's it for my question. Thank you.
And I was going to add to that. I think once we get the actual bids, we'll be in a much better position to know what various apply. And I know we don't have the slides up, but I think the soonest that we are probably going to get, I mean, it will be the spring again. So even though the RFP will start this fall, it will really be this spring before we get actual bids and know what kind of options we have.
Okay. I will say I've been on the board now for about 7 years, and we've gone to bid before, and we've made significant changes to health insurance over the course of that time, in part informed by the realities of the pandemic. But I haven't seen a competitive bid from Dean the entire time I've been on the board. And so I am curious about what this will look like after a very extended period of not requiring that bid. I also think it's important to acknowledge that we made a transition because we had these like locked in rates that do not exist anymore. And we were able to continue to have that locked in rate with Dean. Because they were already charging a significant amount more, and also because they then gave us a 20% increase the following year. So I think like the cost savings, when you really kind of break it down over a significant period of time, is an interesting thing to factor in.
Sure.
That
Thank you. Board Member Saravo.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Board Member Mulder, because this is complicated and I appreciate all the conversation you had around it. I don't, from the last time that I was here for some of these conversations, what stuck out to me was, I think this had to do more with Jennifer. We had done something on the website because it was about usability and if people understood like which route to go, either telehealth or go somewhere, like that was a, do you remember this conversation?
That conversation that you and I had,
No,
or
it was,
it was in the. I need a few more clues.
it was something that we were told one of the last times that we were talking about this is that you were giving out information, people would go to look up what kind of appointment they should have, like information for.
On the district's website.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how will we know that that was effective? Like, what's our follow-up to that? To know if that people are using it more effectively?
So we do get some utilization data from the plan management reports, and I do believe that that includes telemedicine. Yeah, visits, so that is something that we can look at over time.
So we'll know if those two, if that's connected and working over time.
We'll know, yeah, what the utilization looks like. We can also talk with the health plans about what's optimal, you know, if there's room to grow. Some of it depends on their providers' abilities to actually be on a, you know, telehealth platform and some of those things. But we can dig more into that data with them and figure out where we should be and where we are and where we're going.
Okay.
Are. Is that for you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Board Member Vandermeulen and then Board Member Pearson.
Just piggybacking off both Ali and colleagues Ali and Martha. Interesting on the UW and the whole courts situation. Do we have anything in writing that we can share with our members explaining this?
I'm sorry, what exactly do you
That
think we want
that-
to do?
That if we accept one, that if we have an agreement with one, we can't with the other. Because I think they would need to understand that. And I think that needs to be clear, and oftentimes the board doesn't always see that. Or the board sees it and the public doesn't. So I was hoping that that could be more open, more transparent. My second question. Sorry, whatever I dropped.
No, I don't know.
Oh, I thought it was me. Sorry, Maya. But my second question is about, well, actually it's a statement, not a question. And that is, I'm not sure on the national carrier especially. Every time I've had a national carrier and I've had plenty of insurance. I have a rider program because my dad's point guard was an insurance agent and 23 years ago took a chance on me. That's the only reason I have anything other than Medicare and Medicaid. So I'm worried that if we switch to a national plan, that people aren't going to be able to keep their therapists and they aren't going to keep their doctors. How can we reassure them that that won't happen?
No worries.
Yeah, so, you know, a big part of the RFP is that plan matching. And so when they respond, when each carrier responds, we go through their entire plan document, the fine tooth comb, and if there's anything does not align with our plans, that they may not be considered. So, you know, that's something that we put together as a comparison to ensure that we have you know, as close to the same coverage as possible.
That's last time when we switched from GHG to ports, although it was above. people had medications that were suddenly not covered. We got frantic emails and frantic,
And
phone
unfortunately,
calls.
that's the first, we will always educate, and each carrier, that prescription piece is so tricky. Because each carrier has a different formulary, and that's a big piece of the education for staff. That, you know, if we would make a change, even if we stay with the same carriers, we always encourage people to look to see if their drug is still covered, because sometimes the carriers can change throughout the year and not have coverage on some drugs.
so my question is it our responsibility, or their responsibility to check if the drug that they need to keep them alive is there? Is it our responsibility as a district? Will we get sued? I'm asking as a legal, because as a lawyer, will we get sued? If someone ends up not being able to afford their meds and dies of a pre-existing condition caused by that, when they had no knowledge that they could, that program would change. I'm just asking legally, Chair.
Yeah, I don't, the liability question is a little bit tough for me. I do think that, we shouldn't underestimate any transitional. Anytime you, there are going to be transitional issues, and there will have to be massive amounts of education. And it is always best for our employees and their family members to be aware and paying attention and ask questions. Drugs are always an issue. Deductible changes are always an issue. So there is definitely going to be, there are going to be some bumps along the road. And the best way we can counter that is through education.
And
There's-
so that, like, we could offer a staff, like, meetings, this is what is covered. So that way that our individuals, because last time with Jason Courts, there was no knowledge. People didn't know until the last second.
Well, we worked through that, we had
Right.
a lot of meetings, some people didn't show up, but we did a lot of meetings, and for the people that really needed that help. We had transition of care forms, and people were allowed to stay and receive some of their prescription drugs for up to 90 days. We had them working directly with the pharmacy team at Quartz. We had them working with their provider. So all of this we go through the process. Nobody is going to be, you know, caught off guard that they no longer can have this prescription drug. We would be working with them, with the pharmacy care team, to make sure everybody gets what they need.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
huge help. And I, again, not trying to be tough, that's
It's-
how my mind works as an attorney.
That's the biggest piece, is the prescription drugs, as well as that are going through a serious medical condition. If they're in the middle of that and they have to make any sort of changes, we make sure we go through that transition with them and get them taken care of.
Appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
Board Member Pearson, then Board Chair Nichols.
Yeah, thank you. So what I hear us saying is that if we were to go with the national carrier Anthem, then we would just be done with all contracts, but then we possibly will have those issues of contracts because we would be being essentially a contract. So for courts, we would have to pay out some amounts of like up to like possibly $24 million. However, if we do go with national coverage, which is covered, courts would be part of that. Is there some way to negotiate possibly those kind of parameters?
So I
It's the
think when you,
system.
well, I think when you say courts, do you actually mean UW providers and the Unity Point Meritor providers?
I mean, I'm just saying if we, right now, we just have the two.
Mhm.
And so essentially what I'm trying to get at is if we do the national model, and, you know, they would be automatically covered under that national model. Is there some parameters or area of room of negotiation to around that fee? Because then they're just part of the national insurance that we would be having. So it's not necessarily that we are kind of saying we're in our contract per se, but it's just in a different way to allow folks to kind of choose.
If you think of courts as UW Health.
Yeah.
Because the UW Health owns,
Yeah.
so does Unity Point. They're both
Right.
co-owners. So that might be a consideration, but again, it's all negotiable. So
That's definitely a conversation because maybe courts doesn't want to insure us anymore. And maybe they would, I'm not saying that they
Yeah.
can stop, they can't stop. And, but if they look at this from a business perspective, if UW and, Meritor, you need, if they look at this and they're like, hey, we're still going to get the membership, we're still going to get MMS members, but if
Right.
we don't have to actually pay on the insurance side, maybe they'll be willing to negotiate with us on this penalty. That's exactly the conversation we will be having
Okay,
with them. So I hope that clears
Yeah.
it up a little bit,
yeah.
because it is involved.
One thing I would be interested in knowing more about as you guys are going through this process is how some of the insurance. So say I travel to Florida or something and my kid gets hurt and we have like right now we have courts, right? And my kid needs to go to the hospital, whatever, right? Sometimes depending on what the thing is, they don't necessarily cover it or the premium is really high that a deductible is really high. With the national insurance, like how does that, I guess I would just be interested to see like how that might work, because if it's a national insurance that is insuring nationally, it might give some more flexibility for folks in ways that our local insurers may not.
that might be an option, right? They have national networks, so you might have in-network providers in other states for sure. So that's certainly a possibility. We do have, obviously, if you have an emergency anywhere, that's going to be covered, even if it's
Mhm.
out of network, even on our current. And even our two carriers today, they both have what's called out of area dependent coverage. So if you have a dependent, say that's away at college, they can still get non-emergency
Mhm.
care in network, if they make arrangements. So there's some of that that's happening now. And certainly emergency is always covered, but with the national network, you may have a better benefit if you go out of state. The other thing that the nationals do tend to offer a lot of, and Bree, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience, they do offer what's, the HMO option, which is what we have right now, which means you really only get that in-network option. They also have what's called PPO options, right? The preferred, where you get an out-of-network benefit. Maybe it's not as generous as in-network, but so you'll have a higher deductible, maybe more cost sharing. But a lot of them offer those options as well. Those though tend to be a lot more expensive than the original option.
Okay. And I would just the last thing, I would just be interested to learn more the other Dane County options and how that might relate just for cost effectiveness, as we know that life is getting more expensive by the moment. And I only foresee people getting more sick and yeah, so it's a real thing. So I just wonder like how some of these options may weigh for folks in terms of obviously care, but then also the costs and what people can expect from that. I would be interested in some of the other players possibly. So it's just.
For Chair Nichols.
You. Thank you for giving us a overview of the timeline that you'll be on. I do have a question on the timeline. So you anticipate at this point that by early January, you'll have some quotes from people who have responded to the and then somewhere between January and April 1st, the latest, we would need to be making a decision relative to any renewals or plan like new provider changes. Do you think, given some of the changes in the past, when we've had to move providers, do you think the timeline from April through like what I'm seeing is May 15th for people to potentially change? I don't know that they are changing yet. But to potentially change by May 15th, is that enough time for people to be enrolled in a potential new plan? Again, I'm saying potential because we haven't made any decisions yet, right? By July 1, just more lessons learned about what we've seen from the past. To some of board member Vandermeulen's points earlier around kind of the education and clarity that people need if they're changing a provider. Yeah, if you could just speak a little bit about that time, that part of the timeline.
I'm gonna ask Bree since she lived through the last one.
Okay,
Yeah, well, for sure, and I know that, it was a real abrupt, quick change. When
Yeah.
we had to, GHC and come to boards, and it was amazing. We got involved. People that really needed the meetings, you will find, I know we think everybody will be very upset and worried and nervous. You'd be amazed, that at the end of the day, how many people aren't. And we
Actually,
offered a lot of meetings and, we did one-on-ones, and for the people who really were, they were there and it was great and we got them transitioned. So I just worked through this with Verona recently. They left GHC after being there for many years and went all into Dean. And we were able, I know they're not as large as Madison, but they're, it's a good example. We were able to execute on that in that time frame. What I think is good for us in mind too, is that even though we would potentially make that move for 7-1, remember, we have annual enrollment, open enrollment, where people can make changes in the fall. So even if they're not thrilled with what they moved to or they felt like they needed, and we'll keep doing education, right?
okay,
They have another opportunity. I think it's just good to remember they have another opportunity to make that change in the fall, which we 26. Yes, which we communicate.
okay, that's helpful. I do have another question. So you mentioned that we can put whatever we want in the RFP. For the most part, we set the stage in the request for proposal.
For sure.
And I am curious, given the fact that we've been able to be at a particular insurance rate, I don't know if that's the right terminology, right? Does any of that go into a request for proposal? Meaning that we're indicating to folks who want to respond that where we've been historically with a financial piece? Or are we saying due to the all of the factors that we know are now going to be putting pressure, that it's kind of an open door in terms of how they respond? I'm just curious, like, what the approach is, or does that happen in negotiations?
Question. So, they will come out of the chute with the most competitive proposal they can provide. They know they need to do that.
Okay,
And if they can't touch it or they can't get near that for us, given what we're paying right now, because they will have 3 years of history,
so
provide that 3 years
Right.
of claims history. And these are some of the things that go out to the carriers when we request do the RFP. So they will have 3 years history, they will have our census, they will have 3 years of our rates and our renewals. So they will see
Okay.
all of that, and they will know what we're paying now. What they won't know is what our renewal is for 7/1 of 26. They're not getting that. Because some of them are responding
Mhm.
the RFP instead of giving us a renewal. It's, up to the carriers how they want to do that. But they will know where we're at. And if they really can't compete and give us anything competitive, they will decline to quote.
Okay,
Then we will share that with all of you.
okay, got it.
Yep.
And then my last question, it's just maybe just building off of the point that board member Pearson just brought up. I just want to clarify. You were saying that due to the number of employees that we have, there will be a strong recommendation to always have dual choice. And then I heard an asterisk, which is with the exception of going with a national provider. If the board thought that a national provider was more competitive, still provided fairly the same kind of access for our employees to their kind of in-network providers, then if we were to go with a national provider, we would not need a dual choice.
Correct.
Okay. And then that's where there would have to be some negotiation potentially with the court's contract condition. Okay.
And one thing that I will add, and I think it was hinted at one point, and we haven't talked to Bree about this, but one of the considerations in going with a national category, and it's hard to measure this, but customer service, I think would be something that we'd want to talk with them about.
Okay.
National carriers don't have the best reputations for customer service. So I think that would be something we would want to make sure we get information from them on. And there are national measures out there. We could look at those or something, but that would be a factor that we may want to consider in the process.
It will certainly be that, and it'd be a request in the RFP that we have dedicated service team, and these are the things we can put in there based on our size, and that is through our leverage. You know, we're very familiar with all of the national carriers and their service models, better than others. And, you know, that will be a part of the information that we share with all of you when you're contemplating a decision. And that will be baked into the RFP that they need to respond to what we expect.
Okay, that's awesome. Can I just ask one clarification? I'm sorry, Chair Castro, and then I'm done. On the timeline for November 10th, it says M3 begins marketing efforts to obtain medical plan quotes on current plan designs and desired alternates. When you say in the timeline that M3 begins marketing efforts, what does that mean?
That's the RFP.
So the request for proposal
Yes.
is launched. And then is there a proactive approach to reaching out to providers? Or are we following kind of our MMSD traditional RFP posting and, or no, we're not doing MMSD. M3 would be. So yeah, do you all take any other efforts to get as many responses to the RFP as possible?
Yeah, so you've allowed us to do our RFP process, which isn't posting it like you guys
Yeah,
usually do. It's sending it, no, you're okay. It's sending it to viable carriers. No offense, but it's like if we put it out to everything, we would get all of these carrier responses and some of them would just not even be viable.
Okay,
So that's us, you know, listing off the ones that would make the most sense for us. And, you know, awaiting their response. So marketing, sorry, that was some of our insurance.
oh no, that's fine. I mean, then.
Is really the RFP process.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
All right, thank you. Board members Bravo.
Thank you, Chair Castro. I just have one other question. Mostly because of what Board Member Nichols and Vandermeer were talking about. I'm glad you covered the customer service side of things. That was gonna be what I was gonna ask, but when you said that not a lot of people showed up for, like when you're offering education stuff at the beginning. What else? Because obviously people have been through this process before. Are there other proactive measures or ways that people have more ways to try to understand what they should go with if there's more, I think what remember Fannie was talking about, it's like, what if you have more complicated health needs going on and you're really trying to make sure you're making the best choice? Like, can you do that by simply having a lot of tools and, you know, a lot of stuff thrown at you, or to have like a guide, you know, to some extent? And what does that look like?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a couple things to say.
I have a couple of things I'm
Okay.
thinking about too, but go ahead.
Yeah, you know, so we've always tried to figure out what's going to be best for everybody to offer, you know, as many, we all learn in different ways, right? And absorb information. And so we offered in person, we offered after hours one-on-one, where you could call us up directly. We offered virtual education. And so throughout all of those, you know, we felt that it was covered fairly well. I know also the HR team gets a lot of individual calls as well. So even we had large venues, we had individual, and then we had the help desk as well, where people could call in and have conversations about that. But then we also offered a number of online tools if people felt comfortable going in that direction. So we tried to have a little bit of everything. When I said I was surprised we didn't have more people showing up in person. It's typically we get the retirees a lot. They love to be in person, which is fine. But when we received feedback, very positive feedback, and we had people say that, you know, I felt like I had, you know, adequate options. So we're always looking for suggestions, obviously, of how we can better serve the staff, but we try to have a number of different ways to accommodate everyone's schedules as well.
And I would add that, so I've been here about 1.5 years, and trying to engage with employees is a challenge for us. It really is. People are busy, right? We've learned a lot of things. We're trying new things. Where we found the most engagement is offering online interactive session at the end of the afternoon and early. But even that is very, very tough to engage with people, right? People are done with work and they want to go home, right? So we get that, but also people being able to find time during the day, really, really hard. What we are trying to do is multiple channels, like Bree said. We've started doing a few more videos so that people can watch and get information on their own time. Certainly we'll do live. I don't know that the in-person, with active employees, we haven't had much engagement. So the virtual makes a lot more sense. I think in this case, one of the biggest challenges is going to be those people that need that one-on-one conversation, because they're going to want to talk about their own condition and what their needs are for a provider or certain kinds of services. And those you can't do in a large group setting, whether it's virtual or not. And so finding all of the channels that we can to engage with those people, it's going to be a big time commitment. The other thing to keep in mind, and I'm very conscious of this, a big part of that education is going to happen after spring break and before the end of the school year. And that is also a tough time we found to engage with people. It's just a tough time of year. And we're competing with all the other information people are dealing with. And it will be a big lift on us, and it will be a big lift for people to get the information they need. But you know, if it comes to be, we're committed to doing whatever we can. M3 has been a phenomenal partner in helping us. We've also, one of the things we added this year, we've got some educational videos on our website. They've been able to help convert those videos to Spanish language. We're hoping at some point we'll be able to get them in Hmong so that we can make information available to other people as well. So we're trying, but it's definitely a challenge because people are busy and there's a lot they need to get done during the.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you so much for your presentation tonight and the information you're able to convey. We'll stick to the timeline, obviously, so we'll be talking to you in a few months. All right, moving on to board member compensation.
Okay, we received a request to provide the board with information on compensation for school board members. So the first slide that we have is showing a perspective of that were paid to the school board from about 2007 to 2018. And what this board is currently making is $8,000, and these are annual amounts. A board member makes $8,000. The board president makes $8,300. And then there's also supplemental pay for retreats that was approved board at that. So if it's less than 2 hours per day, no, if it's more than 2 hours, less than 3 hours, it's $20. If it's more than 4 hours a day, it's $50. Another comparison that we looked at was the Wisconsin's largest districts, the Big Five, how Madison compares to Racine, Kenosha, Green Bay, and Milwaukee, and what a board member makes for the president. The next slide is how Madison compares to other Dane County districts. The top 5 were included here. Anything less than, there was a big gap in Corona and next high in a district. And there was also a request that we compare ourselves to nationwide districts, including capital cities and school districts that are our size. St. Paul was requested, and Urban Michigan is what we use for some market analysis. The Michigan legislature limits the amount that a school board can make. Phoenix, Omaha, Nebraska, and Portland, Oregon are all volunteer positions. We included Des Moines for comparables. Other Dane County governing bodies, we included the Madison City Council president, the alderperson, annual salary, the Dane County Board of Supervisors, the chair, and also just the supervisor position. The board also asked us to do an analysis of offering insurance benefits to the board. Board members are not currently eligible for the insurance benefits that we offer, and they are not considered district employees. Milwaukee Public School District is the only identified school district in Wisconsin that provides health insurance, dental and vision benefits to its board members. Was kind of out of order. I apologize. We did include some potential board options, which are increasing compensation by a one flat amount, increase compensation annually equal to the adjustment in budget assumptions, leave the compensation as is, do a combination of the changes, and then potentially have a board policy that reviews compensation on a 5-year basis. So now moving forward into the backwards and forwards into the insurance benefits. I did give you the background and the comparative information. We came up with some estimated costs of providing health and dental insurance to board members using the Affordable Care Act model for all 7 board members for the cost annually. Approximately $74,000 for all board members to elect a single board's plan.
Single lowest cost plan.
Certification.
Mhm.
Some of the other considerations for offering insurance benefits are that it may create conflict of interest. The benefits provided to board members would be subject to federal taxation, as board members are not considered common law employees. So the deduction for health insurance would not be taken on a pre-tax basis and reduce taxable income. I'm on slide 22, Jesse. And premiums and associated taxes would be collected from board member stipends. And then the next slide is just the next steps that the benefits team would need to take would be to work with our insurance carriers to modify the plan certificates to extend to board members if that was the decision that the board made. And that's just a regular practice for any insurance that we have, that we modify those plan certificates. And that's it.
Okay,
Ready for questions?
thank you. Board member questions or comments?
I'm gonna start it.
Okay.
I appreciate you taking the time to do the research. I know that this this inquiry of ours came from a place of definitely wanting to see kind of for the time and effort and the commitment that we have to our elected roles. How we compare to others, our kind of local community as well as across other school districts. So I appreciate the time and the energy that you spent researching this. So in terms of the potential board option. Let me just talk through those bullets, Jennifer, are you okay?
Sure.
Okay, maybe that will open up some comments, reflections, or questions from my colleagues.
Okay.
All right, are you okay with that, Chair Castro? Okay,
And concurrence.
all right. So the first board option that you listed was to increase compensation by a one-time flat amount. And, so that would be the board being in agreement on whatever the amount would be, and then voting on that to make it effective.
Yes,
Is that,
yes, we
Okay.
have just given you the recommendations and are awaiting the direction from the board on the next steps to take.
yeah, okay, so that to me sounds like a board member making a motion for a certain amount, it being seconded and there being enough support. So that would be option number one. Option number two, increase compensation annually equal to the adjustment included in the budget assumptions. Can you explain that more fully?
Sure.
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
So every year as the budget team develops the budget, they have some assumptions on what they're going to increase the overall budget by, including the CPI from the WERC and then the amount between each of the steps on the salary tables.
Okay.
So we could go to a model that was, annual compensation equal to those budget assumptions.
I see.
So if I could just.
Yeah.
add a little more specificity. So the first is, the way, the agreements work with, MTI, the step is a requirement, right? And the step is 1.82% of our salary line. It does not have to be negotiated, it's not negotiated.
Okay.
State law says you negotiate up to the unions can negotiate up to the CPI, so it's step plus CPI.
Plus, yep, mhm.
So that's how the two come into play.
And so in that scenario, whatever that finalized percent and amount is, in this scenario, it would be applying it as well to board member kind of base compensation.
Yeah, I would say you would specify step plus CPI, or something short of CPI, whatever, or one or the above, or just whatever.
Okay, so in the second bullet, then the board compensation would change year to year.
Yes.
Okay,
But you could, Chair Nichols, I mean, in looking at number two, that could be a starting point, and then the last bullet you'll get to talks about 3 to 5 year review. So the motion could be.
oh,
so
it could be, I see.
This time, and then you could see what that amount is in 3 to 5. Also,
Got it. All right, I think the other one, leave compensation as is, and a combination of things seems pretty self-explanatory, as well as maybe there's some change, a flat, a one-time flat amount, maybe it's the amount equal to the adjustment or something else. And then reviewing every 3 to 5 years. For the health insurance, can I just ask a follow-up question on that? It seemed like the health insurance poses difficulty. That was the way I interpreted the presentation. Not just, I mean, there's the cost of it, which we would assume there's a cost to everything. But I'm not sure I heard much around how it could be possible. Can you just say more about the health plan piece of this? Cause this would be about if board members wanted to take advantage
Mhm.
of health insurance provided by the district, not every board member who's elected and sits in the seat wants to,
Correct.
correct?
Mhm.
But yeah, if you could just say more about the what could make it possible? I see some of the challenges.
Yeah, it would again be a motion by a board member to make it possible. Not every board member would have to elect it. We just went with. And Rachel helped with the analysis, and getting to those, the numbers that were included in here about whether it was a single plan or a family plan. If this was approved and a board member elected the insurance, I did talk to our legal counsel and asked about a conflict of interest. And you know, how that, there's some legalities around that and some state statutes that ask board members to recuse themselves if they're taking that benefit.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I can,
Sure, you can add what you would like.
yeah, so just the pieces about the taxability, the payment process, that's really just for your information. I don't know that it's necessarily an obstacle, but it would be different than employees. We'd have to do things in the system just to make sure that those things happen, and that, again, that would be a taxable benefit. It would increase your taxable income.
Yeah.
But those are just factors to be aware of if the board were to go down this path. And again, the next step would be, right now, only employees or former employees are eligible under our plan. So that was, it's a part of the process. One thing to keep in mind, the dollar amounts in this estimate are just for health insurance and for dental, because those two benefits the district does contribute to, and they're voluntary. It does not include estimates about long-term disability or life insurance,
Okay.
those other benefits. I noticed that for Milwaukee Public School, they did not include life and disability in what they offered. It was just limited to health, dental, and vision. So vision could also be part of the package if that was what you wanted, but today for employees, the employee pays 100% of that, so that wouldn't be necessarily a cost to the district, assuming that's how you structure.
Okay. My last background question is on one of the slides in your research and pulling all of this together, you did talk about Milwaukee Public Schools is the only district that provides health, dental, and vision. Do you know from talking with anyone with Milwaukee Public Schools, how they were able to, I guess, make that possible for their board members?
I did not get that information. Actually, I think was that WASDA?
A WASPO, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those organizations that got that information for us. I do know that in their benefit guide, they talk about, there's a variety of things where they specify board members are not eligible. For example, Milwaukee offers an opt-out incentive. So they pay you to not take their health insurance. That is not a benefit that their board members can take advantage of. They're specifically.
Oh.
So they obviously were making some decisions about what was appropriate and what was not. But I'm not familiar with the mechanics of how they got to that decision.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, that get us started.
Thank you. Board Member Muldrow, then Board Member Pearson.
Yeah, thank you so much for this research. I really appreciate getting to look at the different bodies of governance locally. I was very surprised by the difference between what a county board supervisor gets and the chair of their board. It's like, that's a really significant difference in terms of salary. I am in favor of this board seeing a significant increase in our compensation related to this work. And I'm also in favor of us having access to healthcare because I think there is a real danger in board members not having access to their healthcare, and that ability, and that's the ability of that to impact someone's capacity for service. And so I think looking at how to make that work is something I want to be really thoughtful about. We are not the only elected officials, we're not employees of the district, or I think about the legislature, you're not an employee of the state, but they are eligible for healthcare through the state's plan. And so I'm curious about that dynamic for other elected officials. So the county board supervisor, the county clerk, those folks are able to get healthcare while not necessarily being employees. They are elected officials, and I'm curious about why that doesn't create the same tension in terms of conflict of interest or, you know, other dynamics that may be presented to us as a reason why we want to reconsider this as something we're interested in investing in.
I think that the positions that you mentioned are usually a full-time position rather than the position, you know, not that you're not doing a tremendous amount of putting in tremendous amount of hours into this, but that is like, that's their regular daytime job. But there are different structures for elected officials where they're full.
Yes, but the question isn't really like what makes them eligible for it.
Mhm.
It's that if it's a conflict of interest and you're an elected leader, you're the executive of our county. How do you navigate that conflict of interest if that's your health insurance benefit that's at the table?
So one thing I can add, and I can't speak to the county necessarily, but for the state, and Angela just reminded me, Tessner, that one that may be statutory. It could be a factor that we can double check. But the other thing for the state, the legislature doesn't vote on health insurance benefits. There is actually the group insurance board, which has elected members and governors appointees, and they are the ones that actually make the decisions on.
I want to push back there for a second. So for a long time, Badger Care covered abortion in the state of Wisconsin, and then Scott Walker, the legislature, changed that. That would be voting on something pretty deeply informed by healthcare, what healthcare, actually voting on what our publicly accessible healthcare does cover.
So there's the state employee health plan,
Mhm.
that's actually administered by the Department of Employees Trust Funds, and all of those decisions are made by the group health board or group insurance board. That is entirely separate than Medicaid care,
Mhm.
which is administered by the Department of Health Services, which is directly accountable to the governor, and the legislature does approve the budget for that program. But the group insurance board are not made up of elected officials, and they're two entirely separate programs.
Okay.
Does that?
That does make sense, and I think it's an important thing to keep in mind in terms of like, this is a group that is making real decisions about someone's health care, just not necessarily their own. Right. And I think like there's an area in which there's a dynamic that could be similar for other bodies of governance in terms of how we make decisions that impact ourselves, decisions that impact the folks who work for the district. I am curious about kind of how we factor in the total amount of taxpayer dollars that are being allocated. So one of the things that I would say creates a pretty pronounced difference between the school board, the county board, and the common council is the number of people we're talking about. And so if you say, we not only do school board members make significantly less than say county board members, but there's also far fewer of them. And so they're not able to distribute work among as many people in terms of their body. I think then you have to factor in, I guess, multiplying that rate times the number of people that are serving in those capacities. So you added up how much the community spends to compensate all of our county board supervisors, plus the pretty significant amount we spend on that board's leadership in comparison to the school board. I think we'd honestly make up that difference for health insurance pretty quickly in terms of our investment in our membership based on the size of our body and the fact that we're making a significant amount less than the average county board supervisor. In comparing us to Milwaukee, it looked like was giving school board members the highest rate of compensation across the state at a little over 30,000. We want to go back to that slide.
For
550.
The Milwaukee is at about 18,000 per school board member.
yes,
If we're looking at kind of the average across these systems and we were saying MMSD wants to bring board members up to a more a higher value of investment based in kind of the time board members spend on this work. What would the recommendation from our administration be? In terms of where we would be landing, what does that figure look like? Or is that something you're expecting or hoping board members to analyze and then motion to? So the hope is that we would look at this and we'd go, okay, we want to settle somewhere in the middle, or we want to consider kind of the trends that have informed this throughout history and the factors. And then one of us would motion and say, we move to increase the wage of the school board to $15,000 a year annually with a 1.8% increase moving forward.
I think that's what board member Mulder, I think that's what the administration would be looking for. I do think it's important to allow time for Bob and his team along with HR to get a total, the total amount, sure it's accurate, and then the board is well aware of that before any motion would be brought before full body.
So when boards have engaged in this work with you previously, Dr. Gothard, and I'm going to use St. Paul as an example because we saw St. Paul, and St. Paul was closer to what Milwaukee is at, closer to about 18,000. How did they arrive at that number? And is that something you are working on with your board?
Very similar to this, looking at comparisons through the council, through other comparable cities, Cleveland, Portland, Des Moines. And then just, again, working closely with administration to get details on the total dollars. St. Paul had insurance and already had, so that wasn't part of it. That was just straight compensation. Also, a pretty comparable city, Minneapolis, right next door. They're already a very higher amount, more like 18 to 20,000. So it made that justification, pretty sound. And that was 2019, I think, when that increase took place.
Can you tell me where they were at before they got to that increase?
Pretty close to where you all are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a really significant jump in part because it's more than doubling. And if you look back at the history, the last time we did this, we kind of got pretty close to double that rate because it is a really low rate kind of generally.
And fairly similar, and they hadn't had any adjustment number of years, I think even perhaps longer than you all had.
Okay. I think that it's really helpful to contextualize this with other bodies of governance locally and with, other communities across the country and particularly regionally. I think looking to Milwaukee as a model is tremendously helpful in part because they do offer insurance. And I think I'm pretty committed to voting in favor of that. And I respect where my fellow board members stand on that issue. And I look forward to kind of getting into the nuance of it. But I guess my question for my fellow board members is, kind of how we get a sense of where people are landing in order to move this work forward efficiently so that we can focus in and make this part of our budget moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we can all take turns answering that, but Board Member Pearson.
Yeah, thanks. Thank y'all for bringing this, like some of the research that was done. In terms of like where folks are landing, I think, to Ali's point, I think it's really important to make sure that we make this with the work, the amount of work that we do, we make sure that this position is as accessible as possible. And when I think about that, I think about some other bodies, elected bodies, or school boards more specifically in other places that don't offer anything as a compensation, or that are purely voluntary for participation. And when I think of who are on those boards, you know, you can only imagine who those people are, right? Without me making necessarily generalizations. But I do think that it is seeing across the board. So allowing, you know, an increased compensation and possibility of insurance, I think is important. Because again, it allows other people to participate in this body as much as possible, in other bodies. When I think about the numbers, if we think just purely off of it, so Dane County, without their chair, it's like almost $500,000 if you just use the numbers that were given. They have a larger, of course, body. I think about if we look at Milwaukee, they have 3 times the students of their body, and I think that they might actually have like a team of staff also too to help support like some of the board members. So when I'm thinking like compensation in terms of like what I think is comparable amounts of work, because Kali's point again earlier of like when you have like a larger body divvying out the work of their boards, you know, I think it's easier to say that if you have a smaller body to divvy out the work, it's a lot more intensive. So in some way, if I look at the one for St. Paul, they have about similar student body, a little more than us, but I could see that amount. And it seems like most of their body is not at large like we are. Everyone has their own district. No, it's at large. Okay, maybe it's Denver that's they have their own districts, and then they have a couple at large members. And from my understanding, they may also have like a team of staff, right, to help support them. And I say that, and I think it's really important to also make it use a staff part, because again, when you have more staff to help you do some of the work, it's a lot easier to get the work done versus when you have like our staff. Jesse is awesome, right? But then it's 7 members who are then pulling most of the work. So in my mind, I could see where we could land like 15,000 is a number that I just instantly thought of, and like how much that would actually cost us. It would be about 105,000 just in terms of just only a year for compensation for board members. And that's just pure 15,000 times 7. I think that's right. If I'm thinking about it. So we just need to when are we looking then to like make this decision tonight to say a motion to direct the administration, or are we thinking in terms of like our regular board meeting to at least like think of thoughts?
The initial thought, I think, was a budget amendment.
Okay.
I think would be the most straightforward way. Your way, I think, could work as well. I'm not sure if that involves many more steps or not, but I think the initial thought was budget amendment.
Okay. That makes sense. The reason why I just asked that is just because like if we do like a flat rate. I'm like trying to think about, you know, comparisons of the other districts, some of the work that goes into it, the size of the district versus being individual areas versus at large. And so I'm thinking about all the different like layers to it. Are we also then thinking about, because from my understanding, there's not necessarily a policy yet that actually dictates that we get compensation? There's an additional compensation policy for like the work groups and things like that, but I don't. So are we also looking to make a change in like putting codify? And I think that that would have to also go with our insurance as well.
So Member Pearson, if I may.
Yeah.
I don't, I mean, you can think about this and certainly the board can do what you feel is most appropriate. State statute just talks about for board compensation, the board will
Determine it, right.
compensation. So I don't know that a policy that's already in state
Yeah.
statute, so what you're doing tonight is part of, you know, is in line with the state statute.
Right. Okay. But for the health insurance piece, that would probably have to have something more to state like a little more extensive, like if we were to offer, for instance, similar to like the other district, like to Milwaukee, like certain stipulations, it would have to lie where versus.
And again, and I would defer to Monica, Petra, Jennifer, I don't know that
Yeah,
because you're not an employee group,
right.
I think this would, we'd be looking at drafting, you know, the agreement to obviously reflecting insurance in the budget.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, those are just kind of like the more procedural things I'm also thinking about too. If we were to move to this,
I think some important things to keep in mind is total investment.
yeah,
The date of that you want to effectuate. So agreeing on when does it go into effect?
Right.
Because that will impact the budget.
Okay.
And, you know, we can work on getting that information to you once you've given us some parameters.
okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank y'all.
All right, board members Bravo, then board member Vandermeulen.
Thank you, Chair Castro. I just kind of want to give like where I'm at with it. I'm in favor of looking at this and I'm glad that it is being looked at because healthcare is changing and different. We never know when that's going to happen. So some stuff that people are reliant on may or may not be there all the time. And with that up in the air, I think it's good to know that we are still supporting each other and body in a way where we can still be effective and show up for work every day. And part of the reason I came to run for this position is because I wanted to get out there and do a lot of the work. So this district being as big as it is, and then being able to attend the WASB conference, it's significantly larger than all the districts around us. So it kind of gave me a really big, it was an eye-opening experience because of how much work is in Madison, just comparatively because of how many students we have. And then all the families that are supporting them. And all of the things that come into this room on a daily basis. It's just, that's where I'm at. I'm just saying, I'm curious to hear more and where the conversation is.
Thank you. Board member Vandermeulen, then board member Nichols.
I have a very technical question. That is, are there restrictions that it was mentioned could be on voting on any issue that would constitute a conflict of interest? That's my number one. I need to know before I can move anywhere on that.
What?
On whether or not accepting the insurance, accepting the money would constitute a conflict of interest that would prevent me from voting on specific issues.
We already received compensation, so I don't think an increase of compensation would make any issue, but I can.
But health insurance might. And that's where my issue is I'm not gonna weigh in on the other. But I am gonna I need to know how it affects my ability to vote. And that's all.
I will add myself to the queue or the deck. I am in favor of this, that the combination of the time that we spend as board members doing the collective board work, and our lower numbers as a body, I think that this is more than fair and reasonable. And the fact that we are citywide, so all of our constituents are citywide, we aren't broken up, and so we're responsible to all the city.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. I think, and then, you know, I was thinking about the future in terms of, you know, it's no secret that historically and even up to now, school boards are majority white for a lot, white and wealthy for a lot of reasons, and there are barriers to participation and entry, and I think low pay is certainly one of them. And so I think about 30 years from now, I hopefully this move would make a move to make this board, this body more accessible to reflect the city of Madison and our student body. I would need more information about healthcare, about navigating the conflict of interest, and then the number, Maya 15,000 sounds right, little less than double, but that sounds reasonable, and I think it should just be a one-time thing. For now, I think boards at specific points in time should deem it necessary when something like this is necessary. Any further questions, comments? Oh,
So mine is
Oh,
just
sorry.
procedural. So if it sounds like board members generally are in favor, one of us has to get an actual budget amendment in. We kind of have gone through the budget amendment process for the June budget vote. So Bob, do you have any guidance for us on how you would like to receive the budget amendment? And is there a deadline that we should be striving to meet?
Yeah, so I would like us to talk about any budget amendments at the September operations work group for the board to vote at the September board meeting. So we
Okay.
can have it wrapped down and can run final numbers with the budget board overflow. The best scenario. Now, obviously the board can do an amendment if they want.
Sure.
Overboard, but I think best would be work with staff if you so want a motion. There to talk about the specifics at the September operations work group. Would be a vote at the September board of education.
Are there, just to clarify, are there questions that board members need to have answered? The compensation part seems more straightforward than the health insurance piece. Is there, Bob, if the budget amendment included a dollar amount for compensation, and if it also included something that was in favor of health insurance, does it need to be more detailed than that, and we'll let the administration figure out the health insurance fees? Or are there some questions that have to be answered to move forward on that?
So for administering health insurance, we'll need to know some specifics about, what options are available, what would be the premium contribution. The estimate that we put together assumed 12% of the premium would be paid by the board members, which is what administrators pay. We also talked about the ACA option as a lower cost alternative, which would basically give everybody the same district contribution to insurance. And if you, and that would be based on the single lowest cost plan. Shows a different plan, you pay the difference, things like that. We would definitely need to know.
Okay.
What those parameters would be.
Okay, so you need the parameters. Okay,
HR needs that.
that would come in through it could come in through the same budget amendment.
Yeah, it would allow
And then
us.
you all can work out total board compensation at a newer amount, total health insurance based on the parameters. Okay,
In one way that we might not really, not expedite, but to just get this started, is to just assume it's the most expensive. You know, kind of start there and then move back if there are other options are selected to at least give us, you know, what a parameter might be. And then work. Rachel, one question would be, could there be a situation where the 7 board members of all selected something different?
I'm assuming that they could, as the estimate assumed for 7 members, basically 5 would select the court's family plan and 2 would select the family plan, but obviously it could be whatever. Obviously, if the family plan, that's going to be a lot more expensive. The DNHMO plan is more expensive than courts. So if all of those options are available to you, then yeah, it depends on what you choose would be the ultimate number.
can I just ask one quick follow-up? So thank you for that. Some one of us will be working on an amendment, it sounds like. Thank you, Bob, for the guidance on the timeline that would be helpful for you to kind of get that into our final budget. And you may not have an answer to this, but I think one of the things that I'm thinking about, particularly when it comes to health insurance, is we are elected to 3-year terms. Okay? But your terms aren't guaranteed to renew unless you decide you're going to run again and you win. In the event that you are a board member who either chooses not to run again or you lose an election, because the vote happens in April, how might that affect the person who has health insurance? And we don't have to answer that tonight, but it is, and I don't know that would be the level of detail that would go into a budget amendment, but it is one of the things I'm thinking about, because it seems like our election cycle might be off cycle to when you would have open enrollment. And so if there's open enrollment every fall and board members, just like district employees, were choosing their health insurance for the year, and then they get to April, if it's their election year, in the worst case scenario or best case scenario, depending on board members' preference, if they were not continuing, I'm wondering what would it look like from April through June 30th, the end of that same fiscal year, for a board member to still access their health insurance? Or would they automatically be, you know, because I know employees oftentimes can get the Cobra extension or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
so,
have to look at that. I
Yeah.
don't know if Cobra would, as non-employees, I don't know if Cobra would apply. So
Yeah.
we definitely have to look at that. That being said, though, the way we structure for school-based employees, teachers as an example, that are leaving the school district, if their last day of work is the last day of school, June 10th, whatever, our policies say that their coverage extends through August. That's just the 12-month period that they have insurance for that year of employment. So I think that could probably be controlled through our policy if you wanted to. But I think the motion would have to specify when does what is the term? Is it for as long as you're seated? I mean, I guess I'm not an expert on board elections, but if you don't run again or you are done or the election is in April, do you continue that term through
No.
June?
No, you were done.
You're done.
You were done by the 3rd week of April swearing in.
Gotcha. So you would want to specify.
okay,
Sorry
Generally,
to interrupt.
so if there are, for other employees not ending the end of the school year, generally their coverage is done the end of that month. So if you're done in April, your coverage is done by the end.
okay.
And then Cobra would kick in, but again, I'm not sure Cobra would. You have to look into that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Board Member Muldrow and then Board Member Mosner Feltham.
Thank you so much, Chair Castro. I wanna make sure I understand the process of the motion. So what I'm hearing is there seems to be a few board members saying $15,000 feels like an okay number to land at. Thank you, Board Member Pearson and Board Vice President Pearson for suggesting that and getting us into that kind of concrete space. I'm hearing board members talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of the health insurance. And I'm wondering if our motion has to include those nuts and bolts, has to be specific to like, this is how this should work. Board members will become eligible for healthcare while serving an elected office. Like, what all needs to be included in the motion in order for the motion to be operationalized. The other question I have around the motion is I am imagining that these are two separate motions. That there is a motion to increase our stipend and a motion to make us eligible for healthcare. And so I'm curious about kind of what is needed from both of those motions. And how we reach consensus as a board beyond this conversation. So I think I'm like, that's what I'm really trying to get into like what we want, because I don't think we have another opportunity to engage. And I also want to speak to, I've heard really powerful points from my fellow board members, and I want to speak to particularly Board Member Vandermillen's concerns about the conflict of interest. I really agree that we want to be available to vote and think critically about things without factoring ourselves and our own positionality into it as much as possible. I also think that if you are very, very sick and we have a government that has limited certain people on this board's access to their healthcare, that also impacts your availability and ability to vote. And that is part of why I think Martha, you speaking to, or Board Member Sarabo, I'm sorry, you speaking to our ability to take care of one another is tremendously powerful in this political climate. Is we want to make sure that we can vote and we want to factor in conflict of interest. We also have to factor in our health availability, our ability to meet our needs as human beings in order to show up in this space effectively. And so I hope we're able to have a conversation in a way that's truly balanced and respectful to one another.
Remember, and I just want to clarify one thing. So one of the things I was just trying to ask Bob about is what exactly is the format and then what all needs to be included, which was also my question about the health insurance. So to your point, this is what I was understanding. My understanding was that someone is going to write an official budget amendment.
Mm-hmm.
The amendment would specify the dollar amount. So if we're going with a one-time increase, and if there's language about, and from here on out, some other adjustment, that would be in there. And then my understanding was that you all in that budget amendment also wanted us to include some parameters about health insurance. You all would do the analysis on what that will cost. And then the budget amendment, once you come back to us and tell us, here's what that will cost us. Then I think board members are, it gets, well, I guess to Board Member Muldrow's point, once we make the amendment, then are we doing a separate motion on the floor to support the amendment? And you're baking it into the overall budget? Or are we drafting our own motion language? Because I thought if we put it in an amendment, usually the way the other amendments have occurred, you've done some analysis, it comes back to a work group, and we have a public conversation about it.
Right.
And then it gets baked into the budget.
Yes.
Okay,
So in this case, what I was, get some direction, could do some more analysis for the September operation. And we'd have to. I view it as a vote at the Board of Education record meeting, I think, in September, salary increase benefit. But part of, for the budget amendment, the dollar amounts, part of that insurance that we could talk more at the September operations work group is, what are we talking about? Health, dental, vision. If that's what we're talking about, then single plan is X, family plan is Y, we'd have to make some assumptions. Rachel mentioned assumption was 5 would take family, 2 would take single. The other thing in terms of a cost to the district is what our board members are gonna pay. Pay anything towards that? 12% for administrators or something less, right? That decision would have to.
Okay,
So I think we would want some directions from a board member on how to prepare that, we can prepare more details, more specificity for September operations work. You're able to craft that motion voted on September Board of Education as an amendment to the budget.
got it. Board Member Muldrow, were you tracking that the way I was
Yes,
tracking it?
I think this is like the detail that I am trying to understand is like, obviously, because we're doing it in relationship to this budget and it's an amendment to the budget, then it lives within like the timeline of this budget. Does that make, like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So it's like, were we to pass this amendment, this budget has already started. And so we'd be saying that board members are now eligible for this new stipend and that is effective as of November 15th, 2025. Or if we're just amending it, would it be like any other budget amendment where it's like, well, that's retroactive in this budget and but board members would be, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like retroactive back to
Yes.
the beginning.
Yes, thank you.
I think,
Go ahead.
I heard that as the board member who wants to write up the amendment is putting that language in.
Okay,
And then when it comes back to us in the work group, we can have discussion about that. Like, should it be retroactive? No, I think it should be effective November 15th. If you go November 15th, you've already lost the health insurance with, like, do you know what I mean? But
Yes.
somebody's gotta like get the language, get us going.
so I'm happy to draft this original motion and do it
I
in
can draft it
partnership
too.
with other board members. But then the other question I had around drafting that motion is, so we would bring it and then we can kind of on the floor discuss it.
I think,
I guess I would say if I'm drafting it, I am curious about other board members' appetite to increase the stipend in relationship to the retreats as well. So kind of that holistic understanding of our compensation or our stipend would, like, if I were to say, board members will be paid $100 for half-day retreats and $200 for full-day retreats, right? Like updating that portion as well. Is that something other board members are interested in? Or is that something you want to leave as is?
I mean, we would have to,
Go ahead.
we'd have to change the policy for the additional compensation, so that would also be just a conversation of that, which would be $15.50. Additional compensation for board members, but I mean,
There's something in that policy that says
it's specific.
can't do something.
Well, no, it doesn't say that we can't do some, it just says specifically that the amount of compensation with the time frames that we listed on there, so those would just need to change how much we're gonna do for the time frames.
Okay, so the policy
so-
actually.
Actually, it
Okay.
lines it out, and the last time that this policy was revised was 1994, last time it was reviewed, 2000.
is that where the $20?
Yeah.
$2.
The $35 and $50, and then the
For
president.
you to just adjust that for inflation.
Yeah. And then the president of the board or designee can automatically submit to the secretary more information if she believes that someone is eligible to receive the compensation, like additional compensation. So it's, yeah, but again,
Wow.
that would need to be, I think, updated depending on how we do that, if we wanna have that appetite to change that. I mean, I don't know if we want to now, but I'm open to it. But I think that would be a conversation that we'd have to think about budget wise.
We even want us to have that?
Well, I mean, I think we are noticed to have that conversation right now too, because it's talking about total compensation.
Oh, yeah,
for-
good point.
So it's an additional piece of compensation.
Good point.
What, the
I didn't thi-
retreats?
I didn't
Yeah.
think about that. Thank you.
Supplemental pay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be open to that being reviewed with a total
Mhm.
increase or flat rate increase or whatever you are leaning towards.
So the last thing I'll say about that, and thank you for the time, Chair Castro, is that I think like we I think we have to incentivize stability on the board. And so I think in the 7 years that I've been on this board, I've worked with 13 different board members. And I think that we need the role to be sustainable and healthy for people in order that for them to be effective in leading long term. And I think that it's really hard to like take vacation time to be at a board retreat. There is a cost that is absorbed by board members, and I think it goes a long way to have that recognized and to have there be a significant investment in the board itself. And so I am looking forward to like connecting with board members and following up with folks. But I do hope that we're using this time that we are noticed for to have as thorough a conversation as possible, so that as we try to move this conversation forward, we're doing it in solidarity. And I know board member Mosner Faltham had her hand up, so I turn it over to her.
Board Member Mosner Feltham.
Thanks. I just, in the interest of, sharing where people are at. I think the first thing I would share is that I find it really heartening that Milwaukee is already doing this for health insurance. And that gives me a lot of, gosh, you probably couldn't barely hear me. That gives me a lot of hope and excitement about the possibility of extending healthcare coverage or health insurance coverage to board members. And with regard to the stipend, I think the main thing that interests me about that is who it makes the service available to, or who will be able to conceive of extending themselves in service to the district and to the students in the district and the families in the district in the future, like widening that pool. I think echoing what Chair Castro had to say. So that's where I'm at with this.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So Board Member Muldrow, thank you for being willing to start to put some language through the budget amendment and motions. Here's one thing I would generally ask. I did hear support for kind of a flat rate amount at 15,000 generally. And given the information we were told tonight about a health insurance premium being deducted from a school board member stipend, I think it might be worth trying to do some math on what a current premium cost might be, and then seeing if the flat rate amount would feel like a reasonable increase. Does that make sense? Like, cause,
Pearson.
yeah,
Is a 12% just, is it as easy as saying 15 times 12% out of a year? So if the board member receives like 15,000 out of it a year, not that simple?
It's 12% of the premium. So the premium, so a quartz family premium right now for this year is about $2,400 a month. So it would be 12% of the 2,400 if you selected the quartz family HMO plan.
And if you take $15,000 and divide it by 12, you have to look at the monthly, your monthly stipend and deduct the monthly premium from the amount of the stipend.
So 12% of 2,400 a month would be $288, and this is just rough math. And then you're thinking like minus, we say 15,000. I'm just using 15,000 as a basis.
yeah.
That's $1,250 a month, and so essentially it would be $288 because we're paid monthly. It would be about $900 is what you then take home. Well, not take home, but gross compared to
Right, with health insurance.
with health insurance. That's as if you
And if you're,
all else 15,000 courts, highest premium amount at 12, which administrators.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And just for reference, that's 3,400 annually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're a board member who already has insurance
You can
and you decline the health insurance, then you wouldn't have a premium deducted and you just have whatever your monthly stipend is.
Or maybe it's a single plan, which is going to be substantially less than.
Right.
Right. Okay, so process wise, then we're saying 2 separate budget amendments. One on compensation, one on healthcare. Goes to your team, Bob, or just that,
Both arms.
both teams, just to the district, the administration. And then you all will work on the budget analysis around both, and then come forth with a recommendation based off of your budget analysis, right? Based off of like what it might look like
We put more information together and present it at the September
at
operation.
the September operations. And then based on, and we have that conversation. And then we are then looking to make a motion, depending how that conversation goes. Possibly we could say, you know what, Bob, your guys' team and Jennifer, your team did great. Like, there's no changes on our part. We would go straight to voting on a motion, and that motion is not drafted by us, or would it be drafted by the admin?
The vote would happen at the September.
But it would
board
happen at the
presentation,
September.
Not at the vote.
And we can work with you.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm just
Yep.
thinking about like,
Yep.
yeah, I think we've all done some iteration.
yeah, that's why I just wanted to clarify again.
Yeah,
But yeah, Ali, I can help you too, like with the compensation one, to add some things together too. The amendment.
All right, board member Saravo.
This is kind of on the smaller scale side of this conversation, but the only thing that I would want to add is, I don't remember who brought it up about the retreats, full day or like
Mhm.
half day or something.
Mhm.
I don't know how that should be worded, but I don't want a full day to be an hour past the half. Half day,
Yeah,
like if
I
you
know
cross
exactly
over,
what you mean.
like just encouraging the full day participation in it, or like acknowledgement of if you can only make a certain part, like let us know so that we can prioritize certain things. Or something to that effect, just so we're utilizing our time in the most effective way with. That's just thoughts on my side of, yeah. Is there more?
No, I was
Your
just,
feedback,
no, I was just,
does that make
so
sense?
there's a question about the time frame for the stipend, or the question about the content of the retreat?
There was a suggestion for the stipend behind the retreat and someone said half day, full day or something like that. But I don't remember who brought it up.
I think it was Ali,
I just want to make sure if we're gonna do a half or full, like if something like that is there.
Mhm.
To just have clarity around full day as a full time and not just an hour past the halftime mark.
you're talking about like the
Yeah.
number of
Oh,
hours.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
So full day, like equivalent to a 7 to 8 hour
Yeah.
day retreat.
I just want
Not
people
4
to be
hours
there for
plus
like a
30
full
minutes.
time and not just me tired. Like I want us to be on board and like working together as much as possible if we're assuming
I see.
people are gonna be there. Does that make?
So like if a board retreat is scheduled for a full day, that participation means that you are participating for the full day. To receive
Right.
the stipends versus like, okay,
Only because someone said half day or it's a full day, and I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want, I don't want a full day to be an hour past the halfway.
right,
You're talking
Mark,
about
something
how
like
a
that.
board member's compensated.
yeah, for the
Right.
time that they're
So-
participating.
Okay, I see Jesse over there nodding.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
She's thinking like half day, 4 hours, full day, 7, not like 5.
Yeah.
Right, but I think what I hear in board member Saravo's point is 2 parts. One is, what's the publicly noticed time of the retreat? So if our retreat is publicly noticed as the 8:30 to 4, or an 8:30 to 3, and then we go into closed session, to me, that's a full day retreat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's the other side of that, which is how long does a board member participate? And that's a different thing. That then becomes an issue of attendance. which I don't think we've had language around attendance, so. And I don't know that we can open that can of worms today, but you may have a publicly noticed retreat. And you may be a board member that has a conflict and you leave halfway.
Yeah,
So I don't know how we would manage that because we haven't typically taken attendance like that, like stayed whole day, left half day.
I do that, that's how we did.
Oh, you do that,
No,
Jesse?
You get
Okay, okay,
hour basis, yeah.
okay, great. Then we don't have an issue.
quick question,
Forget it.
if I may, on the work group chat, work group, Michelle?
On the work groups?
Not on the work groups, on the retreats. When we publicly notice, if we hold them at Holswood, we have to print the number of the build of the room, the code to get in, because otherwise it's not a notice open meeting if the public can't enter.
So that is not within the realm of conversation about compensation.
Neither was, neither.
Cover that another time.
Yeah, that would have to be something that you.
Just want to know on the open records. And transparency, but you have a point. Thank you for the correction.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Well, on to the next topic, which, Bob, you can take us away, the policy review.
Turn over to the Senior Executive Director of Buildings and Facilities, Scott Chiak. Scott, introduce your team and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Gothard and Board of Education. I'd like to start up briefly tonight with reviewing policy 6091 for review by the board to add a few language pieces for milk to our policy. Those with negative account balance. So Petra and Josh here, Petra Services, and Josh Perkins, Head of Food Nutrition Director.
Thanks, Scott. I'm sorry, please forgive my speaking voice or lack thereof this evening. I'm going to try to get through this concisely. The policy that's before you now is a straightforward revision, I believe you will find. And I just want to explain, set some context for it. The policy as it stands currently regarding the ability of students using the food nutrition program to purchase a la carte items limits the sale of those items to students who have a positive balance in their account. That is fairly straightforward and I think rational and reasonable enough. It so happens that into the category of a la carte items, which normally comprises such things as snack foods or beverages, which are not water or milk, but might be premium retail style beverages. There's a category many school districts sell. We do some of this as well. Sell beverages, sell chips, sell cookies, sell auxiliary items to a USDA meal. That is what is the commonly understood definition of a la carte foods. In the eyes of the law, the regulatory definition, milk, when not served as part of a USDA meal, is also an a la carte item. Therefore, it falls into this same category. And the situation that this creates is that a student who, and sometimes these are quite young students, selects a milk that they want to drink with perhaps a meal that they brought from home. They're not taking the entire meal that we serve that day, but they have a milk that they want to purchase. It all goes in that same category. That milk goes in the same category as, for example, and I'll just draw this out a little bit. A lot of a la carte sales in the traditional sense happen in the secondary grades. And that's partly to do with the appropriateness of serving those kinds of items to students. It is also partly to do with disposable income that the students may have and want to exercise the discretion of. But I'll just draw the contrast between a high school student who says, I've had my USDA meal. Thank you very much. I also would like to buy a bubbler and I'd like to buy a bag of chips. And our policy would currently dictate that if they do not have a positive account balance, to say, I'm sorry, you cannot buy those items. We will serve you the USDA meal, but you cannot buy those extra items until your account balance is reconciled and you have a positive balance. That I think is a policy that's not hard to understand and it's not hard to defend. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the possibility of a much younger student saying, I brought my lunch from home and I want to drink milk with my lunch. I have that milk in my hand and I'm in the line, and the person in the line following our current policy to the letter must say, you need to put that milk back. You do not have a positive account balance, and we will not be able to sell you that milk until you can make your account whole. Now, in the case of a very young student, of course, they have little agency to make their account whole. I would posit that this is definitely involving the student as liaison communicator from us to the household. We do communicate with households frequently about negative balance issues. But the policy that we're asking you to look at tonight and entertain a change to would make milk an exception. So we would say the other items in the a la carte category remain, the policy stands. Auxiliary items that fall well outside a USDA meal, chips, snacks, cookies, same thing. You can certainly have the meal. Our policy dictates that we will serve it to you, as you all know. Our policy dictates we will serve you that USDA meal regardless of balance. But the auxiliary items, no, they can't be purchased on credit. But making milk an exception would make it possible for a student to say, I would like to drink a milk with my meal. I do not want anything else extra, to allow them to purchase that or to put that on their account despite having a negative account balance.
So we'll add just an extra of like why now, right? We reviewed this policy back last year in July. And we revised it pretty significantly, have very robust conversations. If folks who are on the board or maybe just in public remember, there were a few folks that came forth about the milk. And so one reason why we tried to ensure that this was on the agenda for tonight was so that we can give the direction to admin so that Josh can work with his team to ensure that this goes into hopefully practice before school starts or by the time that school starts. And so it really is, if you look at the negative account balances, we actually add the language with the exception of milk. And so milk could be served, to Josh's point, in explanation, but this is pretty much the only part that we are looking to discuss of this policy. So I just want to just kind of set the stage as we kind of start to have that discussion.
Thank you.
Board Member Muldrow, then Board Member Vandermill, and then Board Member Suavo.
I'm having a hard time being in favor of this policy or being excited about this policy. In part because I think this policy stigmatizes poverty further. So a child who probably experiences a series of limited options for whatever reason has that reinforced in terms of like food and availability of food at school. I also find this hard to support because I grew up on free or reduced lunch and actually just felt like I was never given enough food to be successful. So like in high school, I think every day for about 4 years, I ate one piece of pizza for lunch. And I think like that didn't have any respect for me as a person who was growing. That didn't really have, it was very much like, this is the bare minimum we have to give it to you. And that is all we're gonna give to you. And that has a real feeling to it as a young person. And so that's not necessarily something I want to promote at this point. I think the kid gets like their free or reduced lunch and then doesn't have money in their account and wants a bag of chips so that they're not hungry and can do better in class. I want them to get the bag of chips. And I think we as a community can figure out how to pay for it. I do see some of the necessity of a policy like this. I think that the other experience that really stands out to me in terms of shaping my perspective of this policy is which kids are going to be associated with not having enough money to buy certain items, right? And so what groups of students will be regularly told, oh, that's not part of your free or reduced lunch, or you don't have enough money. And what does that actually do to our workforce in terms of conditioning them to see certain groups of students as more or less likely to be able to afford food? And the experiences that have shaped that for me are things like going to the Willie Street Co-op and having somebody assume I was on food stamps as an adult, and telling me like that I can't afford to get a smoothie, and having those interactions that are deeply stigmatizing to poverty, that are inaccurate and are also hostile and racialized, and wondering how much of that we really are prepared to navigate in our cafeteria, given some of the dynamics that already inform this district. And so I'm critical of this policy and how it would play out and what it would look like for our young people. I'm critical of what it would look like for a young person to try to purchase something and to be told in front of their peers that their account is negative. And I'm wondering how we're factoring that into this.
I want to make sure that what's on the table is clear, just to the extent to say that the policy of serving a USDA meal regardless of balance, but not allowing a la carte items to be purchased effectively on credit is the current policy.
Mhm.
To change that would require changing our entire policy and budgeting for it as well. What's up on the table tonight is to say milk is included, strictly speaking, in the same category as snack foods and beverages that are like, they're basically retail beverages. They're not milk or water. They're items that you can sell under smart snacks. Many districts do that to generate revenue, but they're well outside of the 5 components that are available in a USDA meal. So currently, a student would never be denied. I think to your point, you mentioned having a slice of pizza. A student who wants a USDA meal could have all 5 components of a USDA meal. And that will be, there's no question of what their balance is. You would like fruit, vegetable, meat alternate, grain, you would like milk. That full meal is available to you with no discussion of balance. If after those 5 components, you're saying, I want a second piece of pizza, bag of chips. Changing the policy as it stands now would be saying, that's fine, it's on us. And we would need to figure out, I just want to make sure it's clear. If that policy were changed, in my opinion, there would need to be some definition of when does that stop? When does it become, I have the 5 components of a USDA meal. I want a bag of chips now, and I also want a bag of chips to put in my backpack for later. At some point, and I point this out to say at some point, the conversation then returns to say that is not part of a USDA meal, and so you will need to buy it. And if your account is in arrears, you have to make the account whole first.
Okay, I feel like I understand this a lot better, that breakdown. So what we're really changing is the availability of milk to students.
Absolutely, that's correct. Absolutely.
And I feel like milk being a more available to young people is completely okay. I think having an option for students who are lactose intolerant then becomes relevant in terms of meeting young people's allergies. And then I guess my other question around like kind of the expense reality of this is how much like milk do we throw away, or how much food do we throw away? And if we're worried about distributing too much food to students, are we worried about food waste and what's getting thrown away and that cost? And
Yeah.
and are we throwing away more food than we're giving away?
Well, we can't legally give food away. That's purchased with Fund $50. It's purchased with federal reimbursements. So that's part of it. We would have to have a structure around that, and
So we're required to throw away food.
we are not required to throw away food,
Oh,
but we're not allowed to buy food with federal reimbursements and say at our discretion, there you go.
So like if I was a kid and I'm like, I want a milk, I brought my home lunch, I want a milk, I could be offered the USADA or acronym
Yes.
meal. And then I could say, because I only wanted the milk, but I didn't want the other stuff, I could just throw away the food and just drink my milk, right? Like that's a reality that kids probably think of, is like to get that milk, because you have to be required to give it. I think the thing is that we're seeing happen a lot is that if I only want the milk, I think then I can just say now without it being an a la carte item, I can just be offered the milk without necessarily being offered the full meal. And so I think there is a component of waste that we could limit some of the waste, I
It
think.
is absolutely correct. Current policy allows us to say, I can serve you extra food that you didn't ask for, didn't want, and thereby claim this as a full meal reimbursably.
Yeah.
And you could throw away most of what I gave you and drink the milk, and this is all according to our policy and according to the law, legitimate. Yes, I think we're
Yeah.
saying, instead, why don't we say we're going to give you
No.
a stigma-free, that the worst version of this happens to very young students.
Mhm.
They don't, I don't know, they might only be a few days in arrears. You don't know. But it's a second grader and they've got a chocolate milk and you're saying, put it back. This is something I think we're a position we're putting our staff into that's not tenable.
And Josh, I just want to offer like one point of clarity too. So in the packet that you were provided on the third page, the front side under negative account balances, subsection A, you'll see the green text. That's the only change that is being offered today.
Thank
The
you.
green text would be new text added, and that is just speaking to what Josh is saying, distinguishing milk from other
Yes.
part items. That's the only change in the policy.
That
I
is correct.
apologize. I thought the color would show up with higher contrast and black.
Thanks,
I
Petra.
was looking for it.
I know, I.
Urgent. I was like, where is the red?
Sorry, I tried to say it at the, but I.
Thank you, Petra. Yes, that is the only change. And to your point earlier, Maya, I just did want to say why now? I will fully confess, I did not have perfect foresight about how this would play out. We certainly have tried to make families aware, please send 50 cents, please keep money in your account. And it works to a certain extent. When you come to a situation where you're saying to a very young student, I'm gonna ask you to put your milk back in front of the line of students, it's pretty devastating.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we will continue to say, please, we accept cash, and please do send the money, please do keep the account, because we don't want this to be another source of debt for the district.
Mhm.
We want it to be a humane policy.
Thank you. All right, board member Vandermeulen, then board member Saravo,
Yeah,
member Nichols, and board member Whitty.
yes, Ali, I understand your point quite a bit. This is to avoid the lunch shaming directly at the checkout counter. That doesn't mean I don't believe we should switch eventually to discuss a policy that involves universal lunch. That doesn't say that we shouldn't discuss a policy. In fact, I think we need to at some point sooner rather than later to discuss that, because no one should. And in fact, it should be provided to everyone. Yes, I do believe in universal, and I think they can be done. The reason why we rushed this and moved this forward is because especially the first month of school, we didn't want in general, kids to be turned away because it can actually have such a chilling effect on students. And that's all.
Board member Saravo.
Honestly, the thing that kind of spoke to me more was when board member Mulcher was talking about that not all kids and milk in and of itself, like my family deals with very specific food, things like that, so although I mean, generally it's pretty good, but like was there a discussion of options?
There was,
If
Are you
it's,
talking about non-lactose milks?
Correct.
We do provide them currently.
would that be part of this?
Great question. I honestly didn't think about this when we were writing the policy, but
there's no reason we couldn't put that in.
I will say that the non-lactose, USDA regulations require the offering of fluid milk. That's a definition of dairy, right?
Yep.
So offering it as an alternative, it's never frowned upon by anybody who administers these programs, USDA, DPI, anybody. It is not a required offering. It's something we offer as a service.
Offering the
I
alternative.
don't think I'm answering your question as directly as you would like, which is that these beverages are not written into this policy.
Okay. So does that mean is it included already or not included, I guess, is where,
Our practice now is that when it's identified to us, the student is lactose intolerant, they cannot have that and they would like a different milk beverage, we provide it.
okay. So it's,
I hope that helps.
yeah, I think that's saying that it's part of the thought process behind it. It would be,
Certainly, we never, maybe I went down a rabbit hole there. We don't, we don't say to families, because this is not required by USDA as one of the 5 components, you cannot have an alternate source, a soy milk or something like this. We do not say this. This is a service we provide.
okay. Then I have one other question, because my daughter actually goes through kind of a flipped version of that, because she's available, because she has access to the free and reduced. But she can only get the milk if the whole lunch comes together. Like, does that? Like, I know that her teachers.
That would change.
Amazing, and you know, if other kids are looking for extras or something along those lines. But they currently say that they need to get the entire lunch in order to have.
This policy change is aimed directly at this circumstance. Where we do not say, you are a student who has a negative balance and you only want milk. Currently, yes, our current policy to some extent incentivizes the practice of saying, why don't you take everything else?
Mhm.
Because then our policy allows me to give you the milk with everything else, and the student would be saying, thanks, all I wanted was the milk.
Yeah.
So the policy change on the table tonight would change that situation. You'd say, you have a negative balance, but I'm going to allow you to put 50 cents additionally onto your account. So you can purchase only the milk. Thereby, this has been brought up a couple of times, thereby potentially circumventing some waste.
Yeah.
For a student who said, I really just wanted the milk. You gave me all this other stuff because your policy says you have to.
Mhm.
And now I'm just gonna throw the other stuff away. Right,
So does that mean that if a student who has, like, if they're eligible for free or reduced, they just want milk because they're always bringing their lunch?
free and reduced students are allowed to make a la carte purchases.
And is that something that you get to know like beforehand, so you're not set? I guess I'm wondering, how do you guys get notified of that before it ends school?
Notified of what? Sorry, not
Like
following completely.
a student who always brings their home lunch, but just wants milk.
So that would normally just show up in our charges. Student who has 50 cents every day. That's it. It shows up as a separate charge. So when we make a meal claim, it doesn't, for a free and reduced student or any student, a meal claim includes a milk as part of the meal. That's not revealed, the claim.
Mm.
Milk charge shows up as a separate charge. Is that answering your question or not? We don't know ahead of time. We would need to go in and look and say, oh, here's a student who.
I think that's what I was wondering, like, how would you know ahead of time if a student just always brought their home lunch every day?
We don't.
And they only wanted to get milk when they were at school, because that was the only thing that they needed.
I mean, as a system, I don't think that I think what Josh is saying is that you can, if we were to go look at all the accounts and you had a student was only getting the 50 cents,
Yeah.
you can make an assumption that is they're getting the milk only.
Mhm.
But I think if we think about it just as in a system sense, usually it's the teacher, the school, and maybe the, people around that would know. It's like, I'm bringing home lunch, like in just practices, like I got my home lunch, or how many kids are doing school lunch. And I think that is kind of, at least in my experience, have been done with the teachers are kind of like the ones that are doing that practice of like, who's got their home lunch, put it in the bucket, who's got the school lunch, And I think at the high school level, then I think it's a different, I don't know if it's necessarily, they have to Josh's point, their own agency somewhat to kind of dictate what they want to eat.
And because of these circumstances and the fact that we're a mixed CEP district, we will have no choice. We need to continue pushing awareness. Hey, you can buy milk, but please keep the money in your account or send 50 cents. We do all that. We can, that's a frequent source of confusion. Well, everything's free, right? Not the milk, right? The USDA meal is, but we have, even though it's not completely effective in some cases, we'll just have to keep on pushing out. You're allowed to buy milk from us alone. Please send cash or keep the funds in the account. But this policy change would allow us not to have that conversation with a young student in the line.
Yeah. I'm on board with that. I was just thinking of different ways to reduce having that, having to spit that extra meal out if they're just going for lunch, and how would the parent activate that? And can I ask for your thought bubble, because I see that you were gonna,
Oh, yeah, I have my hand up.
you were, was it?
It's related to the policy, but not exactly to what you're
Okay,
saying.
I didn't know if there was something you're thinking of that had something to do with that, but thank you very much, and sorry, that was confusing.
Sorry.
I just,
Correcting you.
yeah.
Not at all.
All right, Board Member Nichols.
All right, thank you. The first thing I guess I wanna just say to my colleagues tonight is that I'm having a noticing about the way we're engaging policy. Tonight, between the legal team, the policy committee, and staff, we were brought forward a change. The change reads, this is under negative account balances. Students may be permitted to accumulate negative food service account balance not to exceed $15. A student shall not be permitted to purchase a la carte items without sufficient account balance or cash on hand, new language, with the exception of milk. Likewise, any student that has a negative account balance may not purchase a la carte items with the exception of milk with cash unless the student is also able to bring their account current. And then there's some other language or wrap that we already have in policy about negative account balances. I feel like as this comment, so I'm fine with this change. Okay. I think what I'm trying to still figure out is, in some instances, as a board, we've been much more vocal about how we want to engage policy. And then we have policies that come to us because staff usually find that they're timely and needed. And they're usually, red lines that have already been for us to vote on. And what I'm noticing about us is that even sometimes when the red line seems like it should be a minor substantive change or a needed change, we tend to go deep into kind of the layers below the policy and how it gets operationalized and lots of other things that are important. And I don't have a judgment per se, it's more noticing about, at this table, we're supposed to be looking at the policy red line, thinking about how the implications of it, but ultimately deciding whether or not we should approve it or vote it down, right?
How can you approve it if you don't understand?
Well, I think that you do need to understand how it will be operationalized. It's just more of a noticing that with this one, using milk as an a la carte item, Nikki.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like, we can go into all the different ways that milk is distributed, not distributed, is it wasted, drank, I mean, like all the negative account balances, but I think for sometimes I'm just noticing that we don't necessarily get to kind of like the heart of like the policy piece that we need to approve.
I see your point on that, and we spend an hour discussing staff compensation, but we can't discuss a 50-cent milk carton? But we could pay us?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying.
That answers your question on the amendment. She
So
texted me what I thought of the amendment. I said, I don't agree.
I'm sorry, is that related to this one?
I am just stating that how do we know which ones we're allowed to go in depth and which we're not, and I wasn't.
Oh, it's not about allow, it's not about allow, it's just a noticing, that's all. That I think.
Point, and I apologize, which happens a lot,
Well,
so I
clearly-
apologize.
So let me just say this, Board
Okay.
Member Vandermeulen. I'm I'm not saying that more conversation around policy red lines and us understanding the implications of policy change isn't important. It is very much. It's just a noticing that tonight in a red line around adding with the exception of milk, we're kind of in all kinds of food
That's
service
what I.
deep dives. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's all I'm saying.
Thank
It's just
you.
a
That
noticing.
explains a lot more, and I was completely off track. I
And it
apologize.
makes me wonder how to best engage policy work. It's more that, it's like, because we bring it into work groups, we have a policy that says we'll review each policy 2 times before voting on it, and sometimes it seems like we need a lot deeper understanding on things that I know you all worked really hard to bring forward. That's all. So for me, when I read the green text, with the exception of milk, I think especially Josh, with what you said, especially at the younger grades, like that makes a lot of sense.
And I apologize.
And I will say to my fellow board members who have brought up some other issues, I think there are other issues that we could come back to in this big food services policy. Like there's things in here that we spent quite a bit of time on last year even. Especially around, kind of negative debt and all of that. And those things, bad debt is the way it's titled in here. And I think those things, I was happy we took the deep dive on that because there was
That was.
language change. So it's just a noticing. I don't mean to make anybody
No.
feel badly. It's just, I'm trying to think about how do we engage policy in the work group space?
That works. That
Especially when I know folks are working on it to get it here.
really helps, so I apologize for any misunderstanding, because I think I missed the forest for the trees, which happens every year.
No worries, maybe.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, Claire's hand.
Yeah, board member Lee.
I just wanted to share my student perspective on this. I think that this policy is a good change. I think it's a nutrient dense drink that students need. And I saw, like, as a student in elementary school, I saw a lot of students get the USDA meal and then just for the milk and then throw their food away. So I think it's good that students are getting what they need without having to waste food. So yes, that is all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Board member Muldrow, then board member Mosner Feltham.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation, and I think once we got clarification around what part of the policy we're speaking to, because it is a large involved policy with significant financial implications and implications in relationship to like the nutrients students have available to them. I think it's a policy that I would say after this conversation feels like doesn't necessarily need to be revisited a variety of times. And so I appreciate the questions and the clarification of this evening's conversation. And I appreciate the depth and consideration in relationship to both what we're providing for students and the implications of students not being able to afford certain items or not being able to access milk or hydration. I think there's the sentiment of the policy is equity and is meeting students. And I think clarifying that is worthwhile in terms of understanding it, but I think revisiting it 2 more times
It's a lot.
feels like we're belaboring this conversation, especially if folks feel like they can get to the clarity that you need in this conversation, which for me, I felt like because we've had other more extensive conversations about student lunch debt and about kind of nutrition and what is required of us. I thought that this conversation was extending to that more thoroughly than it actually is. Although I do think it's a step in the right direction of addressing an issue that was coming up for us in an ongoing way as part of the other conversations we had. So that's just my opinion. I don't know if we necessarily need to have this conversation 2 more times.
So we did check on that just because it's not a substantial change. And I think Petra, if you want to just speak to the
Yeah, you had a
possibility
really good explanation.
the possibility of bypassing that second read, in the case that this is not significant. I don't know if I know we had that conversation in our policy committee meeting, but I don't know if you wanna talk to that, to Ali's point really quick.
So we had discussed at the policy committee meeting, the language of 1301 is, I think, ambiguous and open enough to allow us to just immediately vote on this policy at the next regular board meeting. And to bypass a second read if that is what the board would desire to do.
So we would just need a motion, I think, tonight to bypass that second and go straight into the regular board meeting. Or I think that would probably be the best.
Would you like to make it, Maya, or would you?
Yeah, I'm happy to make.
I know that Blair's hand is up, but I'm not making that motion. I'll let y'all.
Yeah, the motion is not in board docs, but we can get that done by the end of the evening. Or the end of this conversation, I'll do it. But board member Mosner, welcome.
Just chiming in to say this is an easy adjustment for me to be excited to approve.
Thank you. Adding myself to the queue. I agree, fairly straightforward, simple. I agree that our policy discussions be as productive as possible, should be as focused as possible. So there was consideration of a motion. Can legal assistant draft the motion, or is that the time we're going with?
I think it would just be moved to, yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I'm happy to move that the board votes on this at our regular board meeting at the end of August and does not have a follow-up conversation in relationship to this policy.
Second, Nikki Vanderman. Oh, sorry.
See, did you get?
If I could see clarification, Chair Castro. Petra, is it your guidance that the board officially waives policy 1301?
Just to the extent that it would require a second read.
And should they make that a motion tonight, vote on that?
Oh, yes, they can do that. Thank you.
So that's the first step. The second would be that policy or if you remember right, policy 6091, with the exception, would be brought forward at the August board.
And so we would vote for as a visual. So essentially bypassing that second for our policy 13.
So just for clarification in making the motion, I'm happy to withdraw the motion I just made, right? Remake the motion saying that the board will waive policy, did you say 1308?
1301.
1301. I move that the board waives policy 1301 in order to vote on policy 6091 at the regular board meeting at the end of August.
Do you need a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I think it's a good thing.
Board member Lee, your advisory vote.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
I
thank you. That motion passes. Okay, thank you. On to unaudited Fund 10 balances.
Nope.
Oh,
Building
wait.
services summer update.
The referendum update.
Notice the building services. summer.
Building perfect.
All right, thank you.
Oh, that's not in my board doc.
It's the number 7 or number 6 above the policy piece.
Okay.
Sad.
Thank you for that discussion. We will go through quickly for building services summer update. Food nutrition, Josh is here, or just leaving. Couple things we've done. We've added Kennedy in our CEP program for 25-26 school year. The 1-year program, and next year we have to evaluate all of our other schools.
Correct.
We have a large focus on participation in our lunch program this coming year, help increase our participation in all of our schools. Some new items to help with that. We have fresh muffins being brought to our schools, brought in from our bakery. Our personal staff, our group's making this. We have globally inspired salt-free season items coming out this year. We can do experimentation over the summer with the team.
We have some protein crumble items coming from our vegetarian groups. We're doing a lot of in-house fresh vegetable processing versus buying processed vegetables. We're buying them in the bulks and be able to process them in-house, which saves us energy, time. Also the good cost benefit for our students. We have chicken and bean burrito bowls coming through in this coming year, barbecue chicken different meals with golden rices. And we have chicken sausages with egg English muffins coming as a breakfast warm option as well for our students. As we continue to keep growing that program, we'll keep adding new items. This is just a handful of the top ones that we've been working towards as we continue to innovate and grow our things moving forward.
Let's say we end.
No, yeah.
Let me finish this slide then. Another thing we're doing is realigning our staff to support our schools in the areas of need by enrollment, also setups. Our challenges in different schools are much different. Also, we have very, very large schools and we have very small schools. We're aligning our students and our staffs to be more in-depth in those schools and give the students more supportive things as they need, include our in-school staff.
I want to just thank you. This is an amazing job and I appreciate it. Also gluten-free will there be gluten-free as well?
Yeah, we are working on both those options as well. Cool. Yep.
That's my only question.
Yep. Custodial maintenance, summer cleanup teams this year. We had something new this year. We do a mass summer cleaning team. So we had 4 different teams moving through our district versus kind of individualized schools working on themselves. One, it built team collaboration. It built standards. It helped us understand what expectations are in all of our facilities, not just certain ones. And we raised the bar in all of our facilities. Our internal goal is we raise our whole goal up 10 percentage points to really increase what our schools look like for coming back into the school year and give the staff a really clean environment so they can do their work to help our students. We are, with the addition of the increased workforce, which was voted upon in the new budget cycle, we are up 16 custodial staff members. That includes all the vacancies we had. Going from last year to this year, we're up 16 folks to really help us in our district. We currently only have 5 vacancies open in custodial, which is a record. Thanks to the dean and the group and HR really supporting us to really get our schools in a great shape this coming year. And the biggest advantage for us is to keep them maintained for the work we put in the summer. Right, we can now maintain and then looking forward to improving every single bit of our school year. Also heavy lift on what we're doing. That's on the maintenance side. We're doing a lot of painting and cleanup work in elementary schools for summer 25. Imagine the 1920s, 1930-year-old buildings, getting some of the facelifts, old plasters off the wall. You're doing the facials and a look at those building compliance. And as of today, we are on time, on budget, ready for opening of the school years for the new CTE labs in Gillespie and Whitehorse. So we'll be operating those options for those middle schools. I'll share some pictures in September when the walls get finally painted, but they look amazing. Transportation, routing is complete for 25-26 school year. Those routes will be available through Infinite Campus probably at the end of the week. We're working with the student schedules, so they'll be available. We are up 8 routes this year to prior years, capacity and the constant growth of our city. And parents are getting really access all the full training students through regular routes, including First Views, our special education program. That pilot was very successful, meaning that all of our parents can track our students at any point, any time.
It's awesome.
Except that they have to download the app, right?
You have to download the app. It's available on the website. We'll see it coming forward. It'll be coming through, things like that. Okay. Going on to referendum work. The picture you see is actually work that was being done at one of our schools. We're doing geotech currently in our school sites, of all our referendum sites, understanding what the groundwork is, the layer of rock, all the compression data, including for geothermal, all in our referendum sites, prepping for that heavy duty work coming forward. We'll go next slide, please. Again, we're gonna go back. It's been a while since we talked a little bit. So our master project schedule, we're in current phase 1. We into the design phase for project schedule, and then we have 2 phases left to go in a referendum work over the next series of years. Next slide. And again, a recap, so it kind of brings in some terms that some folks need to understand. SD design, which is a schematic design, basically talks about bringing the shell of the buildings, how is it purposeful to land, How's it working with adjacencies of all of our environments, our neighborhoods, our city, and how these and the scapes of all the programming around our buildings. That's what we call our SD designs. Next slide, and we get into our DD designs, where it gets talks about more in actually happening inside the walls of how our class is being evolved. What's some of the internal feels, how the students will interact, the HVAC, the plumbing, really the guts of the building, not just the outside, but the internal guts of what those buildings look like. And as we finish that process, we go into what we call the CDs, which is the construction documents. That's forming the blueprints of ground all the way through designs, stuff that our contractors will see that actually execute the project. So with those kind of terms kind of brought forward, next slide, please. One more. Work accomplished so far, and the summer has been a very, very busy summer for us. We had a lot of our internal working teams going through mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, doing all the heavy reviews of every part of our buildings. This is what's establishes us for not just phase 1, but phase 2 and phase 3, and aligns us that we have to make sure we're designing things for now and the future. And we have the backbone, we would call it, of how we do and push our systems forward. We did a lot of heavy engagement in June with landscaping exterior. We did the UDC, which is the Urban Design Committee for the city of Madison, talking about our initial designs, what it should look like, the city's feedback, how it fits into landscapes, the neighborhoods. Did some heavy floor reviews with our principals and our phase 1 schools, really getting them or working with them to understand, how does your school function? How does it work within itself? What does it fit to your neighborhood? How does it fit within the context of what these schools mean? So we did a lot of heavy work and engagement with those and had some selected team members with them. And through all of that process, we kind of got our first deliverable of our schematic design. As we did that, we said, wow, we got a lot of big school, big blown up budget. We need to talk of this more. So we started really defining what things mean and didn't talk in generalities, right? We really got down to the meat and potatoes of, oh, this is what this really means. And yep, we can actually do this. And yep, let's bring this kind of close together as we start to really, I would say, shape our future. Not just big ideas. Let's put them to actual execution points. And then we're able to kind of narrow in and really define what it means, right? Is it a big giant space, or is it, let's be very purposeful. Let's be something that gets used every day and utilize the buildings. You don't have empty dark corridors, blank hallways, dark classrooms. Like, how do we keep it fully engaged? And what can they be used for, right? How can we cross-use those buildings to make them efficient, right? We have a budget. We have to hold our budget. Our students need to see that as well, being fiscally responsible and something that they use all the time. We heard it from our students. I want to go somewhere that buildings are being used all of the time. I don't want a dark, empty classroom because I'll never go there. I'm scared to go there. So we heard that, took that to them. Also in July, a part of that is going through and defining all those budgets, those targets, brought on 2 consultants, environmental and commissioning consultants, working us through this process. And again, redesign, going back to the city to do urban design. How does this look now? How is it shaping, taking their thoughts and their patterns, how it fits in our city, then coming up with that thing. After we did that, end of July, we officially got our budget, our new package of what the drawings look like. They are on time. They're on budget. We're making all of the heavy work with all of our engagements, all of our teams. We were able to get to the point like, hey, we've got it narrowed down to hits the program, hits the scheme, hits our environment, hits our community, and now we're ready to go. So now we have now just passed the SD mark, which is called that schematic shell design. And that's the biggest chunk of the cost that we'll see. And as from there, we start to narrow in on our detailed design of what's in the school and how it fits, giving how our perception is and what we have to do. But those are the plots that will all roll into that first level picture, or just kind of a little bit more defining. But it's a lot to get us down from this level. The next slide. Kind of an idea how we run our project here. Again, we had the pre-vote. We got the invite for our things. As we start hitting our milestones, you can see our budget grew to 663. Say we got to do more work. We got to start talking about some more in-depth detail, what these mean. Got the 525. We weren't ready to pass those features, right? It's a red line, right? We can't get past this until we hit budget, right? We have to be conscious of what we are and meeting our targets. And then currently at the end of July, we can now pass on to that 507 budget mark. We are all truly where we at. Now we have the green light to move forward into our detailed design, right? So there's a stop gate ready to go at 507. With that updated budget, It is slightly different numbers from what we saw pre-referendum to now, given the assessment of how big the buildings are, how they function by student population, by where they are and the topography of those buildings. These are our updated numbers per school as our preliminary budget. Still meets 507, but it kind of puts them what a category is by school, right? Tokyo Orchard Ridge is our biggest school, has the largest population and the toughest challenge, therefore it's in shape, our most expensive school. And then kind of in relationship by capacity, by population and environment, these are where they come in to be. So this is kind of the reshift of the numbers, kind of where they're bucketed to fall through, given all those other parameters that we see. That makes sense. A couple quick pictures, next thing. This is our current, again, some things will change as we work through UDC and finalists, but this is a quick view looking at Shabazz High School.
Ooh.
The southwest.
Wow.
You have a two-story building, there'll be some pretty colorful tiling on the outside. It gives it really good identity. There'll be a small service drive in the front side of it, the shed that's still there, and Sherman Avenue is on your left side. Next slide. Flip around to the Ruskin side, looking at Sherman Middle. So opposite side to Shabazz, and this is the entrance where you would see kind of going to Sherman. Fits into the landscape. Left is Ruskin with the trees, the tree on the hillside. The walking paths that connect the community between Sherman and the residences. And then to the right would be the soccer field or open green space, the ADA accessible playgrounds and the parking. And then this would be the front side of Gompers. So you can see ADA accessible playground. On the back side of the school, there's also another playground for our 4Ks. So they have a kind of a private area back there as well, and also egress in and out of the building, so they don't have to really fight each other. Small parking area or driving lane to do the drop off for the Gomper side. And then if you flip one more slide, this would be the back side of Blackhawk.
Oh, wow.
So the entrance is on the lower side. The elevator is just located just in the center of that building, for both accessibility. The terracotta color you see there would be the library space, cafeteria, and then the wings of the school extending out. On the upper right side would be Gompers, lower is middle school, the left middle school grades as well. But it fits into the landscape and using the hills topography really indicate how we're going to build that school. And at the upper right, you can see the accessible playground, also 4K playground in the upper right. Some upcoming activities. Like I said before, we are now officially in the DD phase of phase 1. Sherman, Shabazz, and we have public input sessions, staff input sessions here at the end of this month, in September, as we get dialed into the DD phase. In September, we do another UDC operational approvals to the city, and we'll start looking towards our permitting for those sites. We have the current existing demolition permits on hand or getting them filed for those two different schools. We are then kicking off phase 2 already for the second phase schools, starting with Cherokee and Tokyo Orchard Ridge in September, having staff input sessions, principal input sessions, and then building into that community input sessions in the fall and the spring as well, as we really kick off already in phase 2, as phase 1 is getting towards the goal of construction done. We have a lot of work to do in September and October. We look forward to bringing the Board of Education more information in October with some real detailed designs of where we are for our detailed design phase, leading up to construction documents starting in November. The expectation, like I said before, of official break ground ceremony will be the 20th of March, with groundbreaking happening slightly before that, getting fenced off and the areas are done. Next slide, just a quick recap. Again, we're in phase 1 right now. Sherman, Shabazz, Blackhawk, Gompers phase. We will start off in October. Any questions?
Hey, thank you so much. See here. Okay, Board Member Pearson, then Board Member Sarabo.
Okay, so I just want to say, when you look at the schematics of the schools, they look beautiful. It definitely, going to our schools that are 100 years old in some schools. Like, this is a dream to really have those nicer facilities. Not to say that our schools are not nice, but Thank you. I just want to say thank you for putting the dates around when the Common Council, Plan Commission and UBC, because I think those are steps that, you know, it's required for you all to kind of go through these processes and understanding that some of these images that we have may change based off of what UDC, which is the Urban Development Commission for City of Madison, and the Plan Commission, which is another area that is, you know, kind of cutthroat sometimes. So I just wanted just to put that out there that in some of those times, some of the things that we're seeing may actually adjust or change based off of those commissions and the Common Council and what they actually approve us to actually build. So I just want to just say thank you for putting those in there, because those are things that if we needed to show up to those meetings, you know, and as citizens or in our own official capacity, you know, that we can do that to kind of speak to and support some of the things that we are now seeing. When we are thinking about, so thank you first. Thanks. When we are seeing in terms of like the construction pieces, is there like a timeline of how we kind of see like the next portions of it? So we have up until September. And when I think of next portion, I'm thinking also like more of what is possibly going into the school and how that is kind of like structured inside. Is that like way down the line?
Yeah, so we're going to what we call DD, right? So
Yeah.
DD tells us kind of what the classroom shall shape to start to look like in the box.
Oh, okay.
And then we're starting to define how many desks, what the tables look like, what's the casework. That's coming in DD. We've got an idea already from the input we've gotten from our students, staff and community. So we're already taking that stuff, putting it into the models to do that. And then we're starting to then kind of feedback and present to the individual school staff and then district leadership as well, to really define there's like a standard, and then also then what's that little shape of the school's twist. So by October, middle of October, hopefully at the OWG in October, we'll be able to show a lot of that detail and kind of build in what that looks like. And then we'll have another 4 weeks to really define if those little hiccups that still show up or as we're kind of finalizing that piece. But we'll have a majority of it ready to go. That won't change a whole lot. It'll just be some minor tweaks. 2 months from now. It goes fast.
Yeah, okay, thank you for explaining that, because also I was thinking of like DD in terms of like what school, so like the design development, but that September piece is more so just what our standard would like baseline.
Yeah, and
creation.
and phase one already in the DD. So
Yeah.
Blackhawk, Sherman Strata
Right.
are in that only really detailed phase.
Okay,
Those are our focus right now, and working with the city to get the approvals and what it looks like, including our internal staff and getting to that, let's call it the end of the kind of the first finish line.
okay,
Construction documents, and then we're already shifting and starting that phase two, so we don't have any laps and gaps of where we're going, right? So there's a little bit of an overlap happening in September, October. We kind of park one, let them finish the construction while we start ramping up what phase two looks like and starting this whole process all over again with SDs, DDs, structure like with.
for phase two.
Yeah, everything starts over again with the whole new process.
Okay.
Standards of mechanical, electrical, plumbing.
Thanks.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you.
All right, board member Serralo.
Yeah, I'm excited about your, I like kind of go through some of the things that stuck out to me. Like we found a baker like raising, that's.
So we've always had the bakery.
Right.
And for the longest time, the allocations were shifted around to do other stuff.
Right.
And it was a move this year to innovate, right? We got to get things and be less plastic and less buying of things that are simple. Let's make it and create, right? And using that same, shifting a batter even from the FPC, shifting a batter to high school to cook it and bake it, adds enthusiasm, right? Second chance breakfast, all the things that can happen. So that has been added as our scope. We'll have muffins a couple times a week. It won't be full time, but as we start to develop then what that looks like, we're already doing a double chocolate, a blueberry, doing a cranberry experimentation, and we're also doing corn muffins as well.
Awesome. Is there like, just on the back end, is there something for schools where if they have extra, they still get to have those available to students? Like if there's some left after you think she'll roll out?
We can't give away by rule, but there's things that staff will take up typically and use.
Okay. Transportation piece, I'm really that the special education routes are finally up there, because I don't think that was available last year, correct?
The tracking, no,
Yeah, okay,
the tracking is new this year through first view.
okay, awesome. That's great. And we needed those for a long time. I'm really, really happy to see that there. And I think the only thing I wanted a little bit more like in depth, or I have a question about for the playgrounds for the new ones that are in there. Curious of what those are gonna look like, because I've seen a lot of different inclusive playground concepts. I'm also wondering if we're doing any fencing for the elementary schools.
That's a good, so a couple things that we're doing on the 4K side of it, we have a small, I would say, kind of built-in landscape barrier if there's a fence, but it's not obtrusive. It's not like you're in some other type of really bad place you don't want to be. On our other side, on our other sites, we're trying to use natural barriers, right? So we'll have a small hill, have some special plantings, or keep kind of like a swale or a dip in there with some taller grasses to kind of give a natural feel and barrier, so the balls can't go into certain places, and it's also harder for folks to run or get out of the supervision sites. So we're kind of aligning that to be easily accessible, but also not easily gotten away from. So we're doing a lot of that work kind of with our consultants and also with OPN to really look at different ways of doing this so it doesn't look institutional.
Yeah, I've seen some fun things done with, I'm thinking of all the runners sometimes that are younger. In ways to keep them safe and in a space where they don't feel that they need a person, where there's something that's more identified as that kind of space. And the only reason I'm asking I really would just like to know more about what's going on with the playgrounds is that I've seen a lot of different kinds, and when I was looking at these, it looks like you can get on there, but there's a lot of structures that you could just get up close to, but you can't interact a lot with unless this is
It's
the
just all,
general.
it's just a picture thrown in. So
Okay,
when it gets to the final, these DD points of it, then we'll have more ability of what's actually going in there and how it all interacts. It's
Okay.
just pictures to kind of, pixels to hold spot.
awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Board Member Nichols?
Thank you. Scott, I just wanted to go back to the budget timeline slide, the one that had the green and the red and getting to July 31st.
Yes.
36.
Oh, yes, thank you.
What was that?
And I was just over here whispering with our superintendent because I wasn't exactly sure how to read this slide.
Yeah.
But what I think I understand now, so I want to give you and everybody that was involved kudos, is that we started with this $507 million referenda for our buildings.
Yep.
Then we had all these input sessions and we got a lot of ideas. And we got so many ideas that the cost to consider all of the ideas actually went up to $663 million.
Yep.
Which is where we were at the beginning of May and was why it's red. Because we didn't have $663 million.
Correct.
Then through some process, which maybe you can elaborate on, between May and July, you were able to take some of those ideas, start to narrow them down and get it down to the next level, which is 525 million, but it's still not at the budget that the community approved.
Correct.
And then you did some additional work between July 15th and July 31st to finally get back to our budget approved referenda amount, 507 million. And you have some schematic designs that are now fully ready to kind of help launch the next phase.
That's correct.
All right. You want to say anything about what your process? Because I didn't catch all that. Like, I literally was like, why is some of the arrow in the timeline red? I see the dollar amount, but like, I couldn't, I didn't know exactly what the story was. But can you just like elaborate a little bit about
Yeah.
what the process was, who was involved to take all of those amazing ideas at $663 million and in May, and how you got us to July 31st.
Yep. So part of this process in the very beginning, we had staff input sessions, staff meetings, student input sessions. It was, give me all of your wants.
Yeah.
What is anything you think you would want in the building? And we said, let's go, and what does it do, right? So you start to really quantify, there's all kinds of wants that happen. Then we also understood what's the need.
Okay.
So between the wants and the needs, as we start to narrow back and say, what can we still give similar to that maybe still fits thy wants and still gives, maybe there's a future need. So we started doing that really narrow views of, let's really dive in. We had principals involved. We had our design architects involved, our internal staff, administration, some teachers, like, if we did this, would this still work for you? Oh yeah, I didn't think of that. Like, so we had all kinds of alternatives that came out through our architects and even our construction managers. What about this? Or our order rep said, hey, we did this in Milwaukee and we did this over here. What about doing this, this, to this? So it became a lot of round table of, I like that idea. Can we do something slightly different, right? So we had, I would say, roughly 25 hours a week of work for the last 8.5 months.
Wow.
Is 25 hours a week and just turning through ideas line by line, room by room, idea by idea to really narrow back, including mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Like, hey, what can we do differently here from our standard used to be to what are others doing, or upcoming other work that we're seeing come futuristically forward? And that's, how do we explore that?
Okay.
What's the cost advantage, right? So we challenged our CMs, like, I don't believe your number. We're seeing this over here, go fix this. And they go, oh yeah, we saw that too. Yep. And they're all kind of working collaboratively and says, yeah, here's the number we're gotten down to. And our CMs of Vogel and Finner said, you know, if you actually did this versus kind of this way, we can save $2 million more, and you don't change the feature. Just a different way of how they're building it. Like, that's great. Architects go back and incorporate that change.
Wow.
Slowly just kind of chip away at it. And as of it was like 2 weeks ago, finally got to the point, like, you agree? You agree? Are you on target? You on target? Now I'll sign. We're at 507.
Wow.
Now let's move. But until that got to that level, was not signed up until we're on budget. So we get to on time. Budget was confirmed. And I think I will be honest, as we start to share back to our principals, the things that they want are still in that school. So it'd be an amazing space. We did some really creative things to make it work really well.
That's awesome. Thanks for lifting up that story. That slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Muldrow.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated getting some insight into what our buildings will look like. I have to admit, I'm tremendously excited about staffing and the implications of that in terms of overtime for our custodial staff and kind of the cost savings that we can expect when we're fully staffed, as well as just the quality of the work environment. And so this year is different than last year, although I think last year really set itself apart from the prior, like 3 years. I'm curious what has allowed for us to see that shift in being the closest to fully staffed we've been in a very significant period of time.
I think there's two things. We've got a lot of internal people recommending good people, which has been a great thing. It's a culture change. It's a shift, right? It's people feeling engaged, feeling good, being able to contribute, and having the message that we're here for something better than ourselves. We're here for the kids in the community. So that you kind of listen to the underlying tone of what we're doing and how we're kind of shaping the district to be destination district, right? People are starting to see that and actually feeling it, right? There's a difference between seeing it and then starting to feel it, and it's starting to gain momentum. And people taking the pride of taking that little extra time and really understanding what they do makes a difference. And then us as leaders and people that kind of help facilitate that it starts with us, right? It's really kind of showing why it's important and getting them engaged and thanking them for their work, looking forward to, like, imagine what this will be when it's like this. Like, how do we get there? Share that vision. I think that's kind of changed some of that corner and that look, and people see Madison growing. And want to be part of that, right? So it's been a huge, like you said, it's a shift. I see it more and more every day.
Yeah, I think what I'm taking away from that, and let me know if I'm off, is that the people who are working for us are acting as ambassadors to employment. And that the people who are working for our organization feel good enough about their role within our organization that they are sharing job opportunities with people. And I think that is a really beautiful shift. And I also think I'm a little curious about how you measure that. And I imagine it's kind of on the application, you check the box, how'd you hear about this role? And what we're seeing more as people are hearing about it from a current staff. Is that the correct assumption?
Yeah, we do. We have we have references come back and you kind of look at the resume and you're like, that person works for us. Like, how do they know them? Or actually you've got staff going, hey, I had a friend of ours apply, or somebody I knew applied, they're a great person, and like, and they're going to the pool, we kind of already see like, oh, great, this is awesome. We've got recommendations, right? And so everybody has a chance to interview. We interview a lot of people. And we pick really, really good staff and people that have the will and the skill, right? It's a combination of both.
That's really exciting. I want to talk a little bit about the stability of staffing in that. So not only are we seeing fewer vacancies and we're better able to fill those vacancies, but are we seeing less turnover and more staff stability, allowing for us to make those kinds of gains?
Yeah, on a short-term basis, we had a discussion last week with our group. We're in the single digit turnovers currently, and in years past, they were seeing well up over double digits. And this year we only had, I think, eight retirees. I mean, a couple people not choose to retire this year. They wanted to kind of hang on a few more years, not because they had needed to, because they wanted to see where we're going and what we're doing. So it's kind of a nice thing where you're holding on to the ones that typically, I want to go. They're like, hold on, I want to see where the ride's going, right? Let's see what happened. So pretty fun to see that.
I think there's something to be celebrated in the kind of environment that is being created. And what that means for the integrity of our services and the opportunities we provide for young people, but also who we are as a district and as an employer. And so I am tremendously grateful for that work and for your leadership, Dr. Gothard, in getting us to a space that is significantly different than where we have been, and tremendously meaningful. I hope we get to continue to have this conversation and continue to strengthen that work. And I guess my curiosity for you, Dr. Gothard, is how do we celebrate this effectively and promote that we're kind of entering this new era as a district in terms of attracting people to work here? And also, how do we sustain that work? Because I don't want to underestimate the effort that has gone into it in getting us to a very different place. And so I'm curious about what it looks like to be a board that contributes meaningfully to your ability to sustain making this a place where people want to spend their careers.
Just a couple comments. Some staff in here heard me speak with our leaders today, and very clear, we're at an important point for MSD and how we brand and market and position ourselves to be a destination school district and this kind of very competitive education, public education, private education choice. And with the growing community that we have, there's excitement around. And I think we have to truly embrace Madison, who we are. And we have to unapologetically share with everyone the great work that we're doing in ways that we haven't always done. Maybe because we didn't have to, because we didn't want to. I think it is going to be a really important point. I think Scott just illustrated how and why it's so important to create a movement like that. People want to be part of it. So I'm excited about that. The referendum was a great one. And to have that excitement, to see these pictures, I mean, we're in a good position to do that. Some of our positive enrollment stabilizing, slowly growing, really positive. So we have to keep that going. Should also share with you that we had two principals, retire, and we remained stable there. Spent the morning with them, and I sure felt great to enter that room and to just feel cohesive unit of people who are leading our buildings. Really did. So I know you all know that it's been a really difficult 5 years. I was reminded of that on July 30th when I got a picture of 5 years ago. And I was giving a press conference to tell our community schools are open in September. You know, to think that was just 5 years ago where we are now. In one way, I wanted to look at that and tear it up or throw my screen, but also really celebrate where we are. You know, as a school district, as a community. So from the board, you know, we're going to engage in a lot of conversations to get people excited about the possibilities that we have. I just ask you to continue to ask questions, continue to give me good feedback, connect me with what you're hearing, and hold on, because we're moving.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a testament to like being very grateful and proud to have selected your leadership for our district at this point. I think there's the reality of surviving the pandemic. And then there's the reality of recovering from it. And that has been a really difficult process. And it's really great to see the gains that we're making and the momentum we're building towards thriving as a community. Thank you very much for your work, for the presentation.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to fund balance.
Bob, you're up. Ready to share some unaudited fund ten numbers?
The abbreviated version. Should have considered, I don't know if I had the scope, should have considered 4 means and not 3. A little bit of humor. So we'll go to the next slide, just so we can keep this short. I want to focus on the 24-25. I want to stress unaudited end of the year balances, which is the third column here. The independent audit team is back in. They are here today and will be here the rest of the week. So they'll go over our numbers, spend a month or two looking at those numbers, leave after this week. But right now, from internal, our perspective on 24-25, I want to highlight the change in fund balance as a negative 14 million, 13.9. Context is our budget for 24-25 had us using $22.4 million. So it's a positive change of $8.4 million. That is, we ended the year using $8.4 million less than we budgeted in our Fund 10. So a couple of highlights on that. One's positive news, and we budget conservatively in terms of our budgets are higher than our actual expenditure. In the context, if you look at the end of the year balance, being about in that $90 to $100 million range of the last 4 years, we're ending this year at $100 million, which is what we'll be starting 25-26 for. I don't have a lot to report on the 25-26 preliminary budget. That is in terms of a lot to report. Haven't changed any of the assumptions in the June budget. We're still continuing to monitor the federal government. Got some good news in the release of the money that was impounded. In terms of, I call that a stay or expectations for 25-26. Big changes though in terms of revenues and expenditure impacts will be the late budget adoption and the state special education category aids. We have to decide what we're going to budget. The state officially said 43% reimbursement rate. Probably going to be closer to, I don't know, 39 or 40%, but those are numbers that have big say in terms of available revenue in terms of for 25-26, which will have a much better picture when it comes to the September operations. But good news is we're starting the year better than what we had budgeted in June. And again, it's so I'm going to quickly go through. I mentioned in terms of the timeline, just like we talked about, the September operations work group will look at some potential changes, really based on primarily that adoption of the state budget as I mentioned, categorical. It has both cost, revenue impacts, and we'll bring a better picture at September for you all to know and realize. Just if you want to go to slide 50 in terms of the membership. Dr. Gothard mentioned in terms of our membership, the budget that you all adopted in June was estimated an increase of 86 FTE. I think our preliminary look now, which is very early on one, we don't have quite the summer school membership calculation for summer of 2025. It's not due to DPI until the end of September, but we'll have a better look at the September operations work group. I do think our registrations and our rolling forward of grades will put us higher than 86 in terms of student enrollment increase on the revenue limit. But again, until that third Friday of September comes in, we spend a couple of weeks after that knowing and calculating and making sure the numbers are right. Don't think I'll have a whole lot of update at the September I know I won't at the September operations work group, but I think we'll have a sense that the trend is continuing what we expected. Also positive news for our revenue. So that's really what I want to talk about in terms of 24-25 Fund 10 balance. And then the 25-26 budget. I'll say also in September at the operations work group, we'll have a complete picture of the different fund balance categories. So I can give you a preliminary estimate of where we think we will be in terms of board's fund balance policy. Fund balance policy is much more than just a Fund 10 ending balance. We have to take into consideration what's assigned, what's restricted, what we will have encumbrances for. It's a bigger picture, but I do believe we're clearly going to be within the range of the 12 to 17%. I'd say my best guess right now, right in the middle of that range. But a couple of things we still need to finalize looking at what would be part of that assigned Fund 10 balance. That is money we know we're going to need this year or future years that we wouldn't want to keep as an unassigned. All right, so that's it on the numbers before we hop to scope and sequence, but Chair Castro, if you want for the questions or comments. Yep.
All right, Board Member Muldrow.
Maybe up last time.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. That
All good.
Shouldn't even be up.
Sorry. Any questions or discussion? Okay, I think go forward.
Great. Last section is scope for operations work group. Got a couple of slides. We've talked about this. Operations work group, as you know, is pretty much the flow of state law. Our policy and the budget will need to look at some things. So that's really what's reflective in the scope in terms of today in September and October throughout the year in terms of the timing of it all. A little bit of focus more on September. I mentioned some things that will be coming to September. We will also be bringing forth our estimates on what we need for cash flow borrowing, which is impacted by our Fund 10 available balance. So we're still just beginning really to go through numbers and the impacts of that, but that'll come at the September operations work group. Scott and his team are going to give us an update on transportation in terms of where we are at it. Again, I hope to have better numbers in terms of summer school FT to impact our revenue limit and just a sense of where our registrations are and monitoring students across the system. To try to get a preliminary sense of where I think that third Friday is going to end up. The biggest change I would say in terms of the operations work group is, we're doing a lot of work under the direction of Dr. Gothard in terms of an enrollment strategy. Reviewing attendance areas and where our populations in terms of demographics and growth and new buildings going on. So we have built in 2 updates to deal with that whole conversation, one in November and then the other one falls in March. So that's really the change in school this year compared to last year for operations. Other than that, everything's the same pretty much. That's all I have.
Okay. Board Member Nichols.
Thanks for working on the scope. My question, Bob, is in November, it says that we will have a health insurance update. That's M3 and HR. This is not to be confused with tonight's earlier conversation about the RFP. Is that the same? Is that an update about the RFP for 26-27, or is this yet to be determined?
No, it's an update on the RFP process.
Okay.
So
Okay.
additional details and another opportunity for you to ask questions.
Okay, so that is, and then in October, the month before, Jennifer, you'll be giving a start of the year HR update. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. For, can I ask one other question about the scope, Bob? So in March, we will be still in our 2026-2027 budget development. And here we'll be bringing in kind of healthcare and benefits, compensation, revenue projections, and review of priority and equity proposals. And I'm gonna ask this question and you just let me know if you can answer it or not tonight. Given that we have a new strategic framework, some guiding principles, some performance objectives, you know, mission and vision. Do you think the priority and equity proposal process for your team, for the team internally, will change so that it's more in alignment with the new strategic framework, or might there be a different way that we're approaching equity indicators or priority projects coming into the next budget year? I think I asked this as we were developing the budget this last year too.
Chair Nichols, members of the board, I think it's best to say that Assistant Superintendent Green is going to work as we get the performance objective set to, you know, we have the mission, the vision, the guiding commitments, the performance objectives. The next step is to create the focus areas, the large groups of work to help us organize, and then really dig in deep vertically about aligning strategies. So I think part of her process will be, the team's process will be to take what we're currently doing and organize it within the new structure of the strategic plan. But there's no doubt there are new areas to identify, areas of what we're hearing from the areas that we need to expand or add, you know, strategies that will indeed require funding.
Okay, do you, thank you for that, Dr. Gather. Do you think this year's or this scope going into next year's budget, will it still be a little bit of a transition?
Definitely.
Like we're kind of doing some things that we've already committed to, and then we're kind of moving towards more of the focus areas and strategies for the following year. And so we're kind of in a bridging year, maybe?
I do challenging work for school systems around the country, is that we're really bad about removing things.
Yes.
And we just add, like this morning, I shared some of the comments I heard in my visits from last year, as I would just flat out ask groups who were saying they're overwhelmed, those too many initiatives. I would just ask, what would you like us to remove? Many time it led to awkward silence because people don't even know how to engage. So that could mean a few things. It could mean that we don't know what we're doing well and what we aren't. So there's no normal way, there's no place to orient, you know, that question or that response. And it could mean we're just not organized enough for us to see clearly, you know, where we go. So the goal is to get us organized in a sustainable way where we demonstrate progress.
Okay. Great. Scope looks good. There's nothing else that stands out for me. Appreciate it.
No problem. Board Member Moser-Feltham, then Board Member Saravo.
Thanks. I wonder, Chair, if you would consider adding an update on sustainability before April, like maybe in the fall.
It'll be part of, some of it will be part of the new build, so come through in October.
Great, thanks.
Is that it, Board Member Moser-Feltham? Okay, Board Member Saravo.
Chair Castro, I just had one question to, I know we're keeping an eye on the different funds that are being available, and is IDEA gonna be somewhere built into one of these pieces, since we have to keep an eye on that as well, and what goes along with it and what gets affected?
We have our allocation for 25-26 with IDA. It's about what we had in 24-25. I think the big question for us as 6-27 is what is it? But for 25-20, IDEA is about what we had last year. So no major change regarding the funding and how we're using those resources.
Okay, I'm just keeping an eye on it essentially.
Yeah, it's big. A few months ago now, DPI was really has advised every district to spend down carryover balance, which is a really foreign concept, right? We normally keep some of the carryover to be able to build that as part of your budgeting, but they really are recommending, all SEAs are recommending across the nation to spend down your carryover. So that's their directive for the 25-26 school year, which was a big change in how we do it. Okay.
Board Member Muldrow?
Yeah, my question is really about our timeline for budget planning. I know going into this year, we had to factor in pretty considerable unknowns related to the state's biannual budget, and the federal government. Given that we know where the state is going to land next year, given that we've passed the referendum, it seems like we should have a pretty clear perspective of what our preliminary budget is gonna look like early in the year. Historically, we had been given a draft preliminary budget printed out in April. And this year, I believe we received that in May, and I think that's, we received it last year as well. I'm wondering if we're able to get the draft preliminary budget in advance this year and ahead of kinds of conversations around the budget so that we can engage with the materials directly, especially given that there isn't the same level of uncertainty in relationship to our budget going into next year. And the other thing I think I would factor into that is that because the state has shifted its reimbursement for special education, my hope is that that has a significant impact, but I don't feel qualified to calculate what that will look like independent of you all providing us that information. And so some of my curiosity is, given that we know what's going to happen, but maybe need the support of our administration in order to understand how those changes materialize for the district's resources, are we gonna have access to our preliminary budget earlier this year? And are we gonna be able to have those conversations in a more thoroughly informed way than we were able to the last couple of years?
I understand the question, and the ask. I would say, I would wanna talk more about what are you looking for to have in, right, in terms of preliminary budget versus rolling forward what 25-26 is. I mean, a preliminary budget to me is, you're absolutely right, we have some estimates. We know what general aid's gonna be, 0 increase. We know what categorical reimbursement is. We'll make an estimate what we think that 43% really means. I think it's probably closer to 30% what we should budget for.
Okay.
State revenues in, but I'm gonna spend a little bit more time with the team working over the next month to have that will inform the 25-26 budget. But the big factors that we really need to roll forward to 26-27 are pretty much be a 1.8% step up to 2%. What will be CPI decision by the board? What will our health insurance cost? That's it. I won't know that. Right? We can give ranges and projections, but an actual per se, but I've looked historically what the district used to do. And frankly, I don't put any weight in all those budgets that were printed out in terms of a preliminary budget. Now, we can talk about enrollment projections. We can talk about ranges of projections of what a reimbursement means at state categorical. Federal dollars, big guess, right, for 26-27. So talking about the issues and doing some ranges and projections, I think, yeah, we could possibly do that in April. But the work to put a budget together is weeks of work, and I believe it's not efficient or effective. And quite frankly, not informed. So kind of really means what do you mean by that, right?
So you're saying even given the things that are not in play in the same way that they have been in prior budgets, you think we don't have enough information in terms of the increases in relationship to, like, we will know the cost of living increase by April of next year.
Well, the question will be,
We will know what.
will the board have a decision in terms of what they're willing to negotiate, what they're willing to provide until the level, right? So it's just all having a conversation about the big factors that move our budget.
Yes.
I think that's legitimate, right? But to actually say, produce the same budget you did in June, but do it in April for 26, 27, I'll say, that's weeks worth of work or nothing, right? But having a conversation, enrollment projection, revenue estimates, state, that's worth having a conversation. The big piece of that format, yeah, that makes sense, but not the actual document.
And so I guess the reason I'm interested in the actual document is because I think that actual document should have a table that informs, I think, the board's investment in something like COLA or something like health insurance, these big pieces, should be informed by the budget in its entirety, right? I don't think, it's kind of what comes first is the spending or the awareness of the impact of the spending, if that makes sense. And I think in my personal preference is that I have an awareness of the impact of spending before spending. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where you at?
So, but I think, so, one, I think the format that we've used the last years gives you the impacts, right? It gives you the estimated impacts to cost. And I totally agree, we're in a much different situation in terms of revenues, right? State's on a 2-year budget, we have a budget, what it is. So now the only wild card is the federal government gonna match the money they provided this year, next year? We'll have to find that out, right? But I think we can take care of the state side. We'll have some estimates on enrollment projections, right? What's third Friday, September, second Friday in January, where are we trending? Those are big changes that will have real changes on our revenue limit if our enrollments continue as I hope they will, and as we have been showing historically the last 2 years. Changes our base revenues, puts us in a different point of context and sustainable revenues forward. Yeah.
I think part of my concern in relationship to planning ahead and around this is our referendums. And the presumption when I arrived at those numbers related to our referendum is that we had seen the most historically volatile economy like that we were going to see while we were at the board, that we wouldn't see COLA at 8% again. And I have some concern that we're going into years that our referendums actually aren't poised to aren't poised to be able to absorb the full cost of inflation given the rate we're going. And so any ability to get ahead of that or have greater awareness of how to manage that is greatly appreciated. And I'm not saying that's not embedded in the scope and sequence that we've been given. I just want to better understand how we're going to have that conversation coherently as a board. And if that's an irrational concern, Bob, please feel free to be very reassuring and say, nope, we calculated for this situation and we're going to be able to weather the storm. But I have some worry that we were more optimistic in terms of the stability of our economy when we passed the referendum than maybe is going to be the actual reality of what we're going into over the course of the next few years.
Yeah. All right. First, not irrational at all in terms of talking about the issues and the drivers of our budget and completely with that. My concern and what I'm raising now is the staff time it takes to develop a draft document, the draft true preliminary budget is weeks in the making, and it's just not that useful, right? But the other thing, talk about our estimates and our assumptions in terms of CPI, I can tell you right now, it's about 3%. So if CPI goes a lot above 3%, that will blow a hole in our original projections for referendum 2024, right? And right now, projections are for this next year, maybe 3, maybe 4%, but after that, absolutely, right? I mean, 80% of our budget's salary and benefits. So any upward back to the 8% range, we're not gonna have sustained.
I think it's gonna be a really interesting year to factor in
Exciting.
the things that could impact our budget. And I think that as far as what we can do locally, I think we've done everything we can to stabilize resources and revenue and increase enrollment, and we'll continue in those efforts. I do hope that there is a process of flagging where we're gonna land in June of next year.
Absolutely.
That's it for me. Thanks, Chair Castro.
Thank you. Board Member Moser Feltham.
Thank you. I wanted to just echo what Board Member Muldrow is saying about having these estimates and these assumptions laid out as early as possible. That would be really helpful for me too. And the other thing that I wondered about is that when we do First Friday count, if that's a good time to get a sense of open enrollment to other districts.
Oh, it looks like you went out on mute.
I caught the
Oh,
first part.
okay. I was gonna echo what Board Member Muldrow was saying about having those estimates available earlier. There's assumptions available as early as we can to get I hear what she's saying about having the full picture before the spending instead of the spending into the full picture. So I just wanted to echo that and say that would be helpful for me too. Wherever sort of your team lands on what's reasonable at what time. And then my second question was about the scope and sequence where we're going to talk about First Friday count and enrollment numbers. If that would be a good time to also get information about open enrollment to other districts from students who are living within the MMSD boundaries.
No, Board Member Moser Feltham, I don't know if third Friday count would be the ideal time to give an official count on that, because I'm not exactly sure if we would have the full picture by then, but what I can commit to you is through the process that Assistant Superintendent Green is going to be leading. Open enrollment data both in and out is something that will be a pretty big focus of that work. So you may not see it related to our budget scope and sequence or operations work group scope and sequence. But there will be other spaces and places where that very much comes into view for you as a board member and for the community as we report that out.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right. Any further questions? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I think she's trying to ask.
Board Member Nichols, do you have any? Board Member.
Wait.
Good.
Yeah, I've been trying to take one of the things that we discussed this last year that I think will come back at OWG.
Okay,
Have one thing, but I'll talk to you.
sounds good. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Board Member Lee, your advisory vote.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Bye.